Agnarantimarandasya gnananjana shalakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Hey Krishna Karana Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kamchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutu Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Hare Ram, Ram Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Ya Kandandu Tasharahara Davala, Ya Shabruta Svavrita, Ya Vina Varadandamanti Tatkara, Ya Shvetad Padmasana, Ya Brahmachutta Shankara Pripritipir, Devye Sada Vandita, Samam Patu Saraswati Bhagavati Pradam Sharade Buddhi Pradam Sharade. So just a request, if you can put the phones on silent, if you have phones with you. So happy Krishna Janmashtami, everybody. It's very nice to have you here. And if you didn't know, Krishna was born 5,251 years ago. So, and obviously the coming of the Lord was part of his plan to manifest onto the earth. And when the Lord comes, he comes always for a specific reason. It's not random. He comes for a purpose. And the Lord has manifested on this earth many, many times. Sometimes he chooses to do it in a very hidden way. So, for example, like Mavatara Babaji has remained obscure for a very, very long time. Many people don't know who he is, but yet he's been guiding humanity for a very long time. Other incarnations, such as Krishna's, was very, very public. Everybody got to know about him. The tales about his deeds, about his leelas, were known all around Bharat, all around India at that time. So he was very famous. So today we're going to be talking about aligning with the will of God. And Arjuna, in this discussion with Krishna on the Kurukshetra battlefield, he receives a lot of information from Krishna. He receives a lot of understanding. And part of that is understanding how to align to the will of God. And Krishna, obviously, because it's Krishna Janmashtami, he appeared, part of his work in that incarnation was to give humanity the wisdom, the knowledge to come through this very dark age which we call Kali Yuga. It started about 5,000 years ago, and it runs for 432,000 years. So Krishna said to Arjuna, Yada yada hi dharmasya glani bhavati bharata abhyuthanam adharmasya tadatmanam strajamyaham. Saying that, Arjuna, whenever there is a decline in dharma, in righteousness, and an increase of adharma, it is then that I manifest myself. So he came primarily to restore righteousness on the earth. And one of the ways in which he did this, knowing that humanity would be entering into Kali Yuga, a period where humanity is very attached to the material life. Many years ago, when I was walking on my way to work in London, walking down the road, and I was walking past the bus stop, and they always had the advertisements at the bus stop, and it said, why have love when you can have chocolate? And this is like the materialistic age of Kali Yuga. It's like, yeah, why really have love when you can have something material? So of course, we're very attached to materialism in this age, in this day and age. And as a result of this, it's easy to become lost, deluded, to forget why we're here. What is the purpose of life? So the Gita was given as a reminder to humanity, to remind them what you were here for. What is your purpose? Is there a purpose for the soul? Do we have a soul? What is the journey of that soul, and what is its destination? What is the purpose of God? And can we align to the will of God? 神的目的是什么？我们能和神的意志一致吗？这都在博家梵歌里面讲到过。所以博家梵歌是我们今天主要运用的经典。我会选择一些章节。 So what is God's will? Sometimes it's a bit hard to know what that is. What does God want? I'm sure everybody's asked at one stage, God, what do you want?
神想要知道什么？
Stop giving me this difficult life.
我们应该都问过神想
I'm
要什么
suffering too much.
不要再给我这个艰难的人
Well,
生
looking
了
at this verse, so this is the
太痛苦了。
conclusion of the
但我们
Gita,
看这一章节，
chapter 18,
这
verse
是
66.
这个
Where he
博家梵
says
歌的
to
总结。
Arjuna, Sarva dhammam parijajya
他说
mamekam sharanam vraja ahantvam sarva papibhyo makshayashami ma shuchaha. Abandoning all dhammas, surrender to me alone. I will take care of all of your
舍
sins.
弃所有的达摩，
I will
臣服
liberate
于
you.
我，
Have
我会
no
拿
fear.
走你所有的罪过，我会使你解脱，不要
It's
有
all about
恐惧。
relationship. Ultimately, this journey, this path of life,
归结于
it's
关
about
系，
relationship.
这
In the
个
Bible, Matthew
人生的
22,
旅
verse
程
37,
是关于关
Jesus
系。
is answering somebody and he says,
在
Love the Lord your God
圣
with
经
all
里
your
面
heart and with all your soul and all of your mind.
耶稣有回答，
And in the
用你
Gita,
全身心地
Krishna
去爱
talks
神。
also specifically about
在博
relationship.
家梵歌里面，
It culminates
可
in
是那也说
relationship
过
and how
这
to
个关
have that
系，
relationship. The
我
Supreme
们如
Being,
何去拥有这个关系？
Narayana, manifest in different aspects,
神圣
Rama,
的
Krishna,
存
Narasimha,
在，那罗
many
延，
others.
他显现了自己的不同的
He
面
comes to
相。
remind about relationship, primarily
他
relationship,
来
more
这
than
里
anything else.
提醒我们这个关系，
And he wants to have a
最主要的
direct,
关系，
loving
超越一切
relationship
的。
with humanity,
他
with
想
every
要
single person.
这个与人类有爱的
But
关系，
we
与
might
每
not
一个人
understand
都
that
拥有这个
actually
关系
completely.
但是
We might not understand what it
我们可能
means
不
to
太
have a
理解。
relationship with the Lord.
我们可能不太理解
And what kind of
与
relationship would
神
we
拥有关
have
系是什么。
if we had one?
这
Well,
种
he
关
says
系，
in
如果我
here,
们有的话，是什么关系
he
呢？
says, surrender to
他
me
说
alone.
在这里，他说
So it's very
臣服于
exclusive.
我，
The Lord wants your love exclusively.
这是非常
He wants your
独特的。
focus
他想要
exclusively for him.
你独一无二的
He
爱，
wants your love
他需
exclusively
要
for him.
你全程的专注于他，
He wants
他
your
想要你
focus
全程
exclusively
的
on
爱
him.
他想要你
And there's no plan
独有
B.
的专注。
When he says surrender to me
这里
alone,
没有
he means
第二个
there
计
isn't
划。
a number
当他
two
说
or a
臣
number
服于
three.
我的时
There
候
is，only a number one.
这里没有
Just
第二号、
before
第
I
三
was
号，只有第一
initiated,
号，臣服于他。
Guruji pounced on
在
me
我
and he asked me a question. When will you become a
起营
monk?
之前，
And
咕
I
噜
was very
基
shocked.
问我，
I was not ready for this question at
但
all. I'd only met
你
him
什
like
么时
3
候
or
会
4
成为一
times.
个
And
修士？
it was just
我没
like
有准
out
备
of the
好
blue.
回答这个问题，
So I said, oh, give me a
就这
year
样
to make that decision. I need to make that decision with my heart.
所以
So
我说给我，
I was in the
我
process
说
of
我要需要与我
making
的
that
心
decision.
达成
And I
做
said
这
to
个
God,
决
okay,
定，
God,
给我1年的时间，
wherever
所以
you
我
are,
就在
if it's
心
not
里
meant to
面
be,
做这个决定。我说我
or
神
if it
你
is
在
meant
哪
to
里
be,？
如果不
these
是
3
应
matages
该
that
的
I'm
话，
interested in, it
或
will
者
not
是
work
应该的
out.
话，这3
Because I
个
really
我
wanted to
感
test,
兴
I
趣
really wanted
的
to
女
make
士
sure
我们都不
we're
会
not
有
going to
结
have an
果，
accident here, are
因
we?
为我真
And I'm
的
going to go
很
in the
想
wrong
要测
direction of
试。
life.
我们这里是没
So
有
obviously it didn't work out.
偶然的，我们所
Being
以
a monk for
当
many
然
years
呢
now.，
这肯定是没有结果的。
And
我成为
obviously
了
God
一个
wanted
修
to have a
士，
relationship. He was like, no, stop playing around with the material world.
所以
It's time for you to have a relationship with me.
神想说，不要与物质世
So
界
God is
产生关
asking
系，
for that
与我产生关
relationship
系。
and a sincere
所以神
relationship
在
of love and devotion.
渴求那份关系，
Now,
特别
he
是
wants
奉爱的
that
关系
love.。He wants that focus exclusively for him.
所以他
in
想要
that-
那份关系，那份专注，
With that focused mind only on the Lord and the love
没有
directed
专注
only
的
towards
头
the
脑的
Lord,
话，专
there
注在
can't
头
be
上，
any other thing really
那
in
份
your
爱
life.
直接在神身上，
There's a saying,
这
you
里
give somebody
生
the
命你就不
finger
会
and
有
they take the
不应
arm.
该有其他东西。
Well, it's
比如
like that
说
with God, but much more.
你给了一个人手指，
You
他
give
们
the,
拿
you give
拿
the
了
finger, he takes
你
the
的整个手掌，
hand,
就像
the wrist, he takes the arm,
就
and
像
he takes
与
the
你
whole
与神的
body.
关系一样，
Eventually, he takes everything, including
他
the
把你
heart.
整个身体都拿走了，最终他拿走
Guruji
了一
said when
切，
he was
以
giving
及
the
你的心
commentary。on the Narada Bhakti Sutras, he said,
咕噜基说，
True devotion awakens
他
only
在
when the mind is
巴
free
克蒂
from
传
all
里面
cravings,
评注里面说，
all desires. That supreme bliss will awaken only when there is complete renunciation to the
只有我
external
们
enjoyment. So it means that we're not
放弃
looking
了
for
一切
enjoyment
的时候，我们
anymore
才
in
能
the
够体
external
验到
reality,
神性
in
的
the
喜悦。
material world. in the material creation.
我们不再去感受这个物质世界的
We've
快乐。
renounced that. We've said, okay, I've had enough fun in the
我
world.
们放弃了那一切。我
Now
们
I'm
会
just
说
going to
好
look for
的
the，
我已
divine.
经经历
I'm
了
going to look for God.
足够的快乐在这个世界
Many
上，
saints
我现
have
在只
attained that
渴求神
relationship
性，
and
我
to
渴
the,
求
to
神。
the, to the supremacy
很
of
多
that
圣人
relationship.
都达成了这
It
种
is
关系，
possible to achieve what God wants, to have that
这是
sincere,
可能的。
direct, exclusive relationship.
有那种真诚
And it
的
has to be your only
独一
focus, your
的
only
与神
aim,
的关系，
until it's
这
reaches its
这必须
penultimate
成为
state.
你唯一的专注。
And if one has that desire to have that relationship with God,
如果
it can't
一
be
个
like,
人有
yes, I
那
want
种
it
渴望
today,
拥
and
有
then
这份关
tomorrow
系
it's
的
like,
话，
no, I changed my mind.
不能像今
It
天
has
我
to
想
be
要
the same
明天
want, the
我
same
改变主意
desire,
了。
the same aim, day after
这
day,
必须
week
要
after
是
week, year
同样一
after
个目
year,
标，同样一
decade
个
after
渴
decade,
求，一天一天，一年一
or maybe
年，
life after
10
life
年
after
10年
life
这样
after
子，
life. Can also be
甚
like
至
that.
一生一
This is
生
how
一
it is
生
in the
的，
lives of the saints.
也有可能
They've
是。
come many, many times to have relationship.
这就是圣人的生活，他们很多次都来到了这个世界，去拥有这个关系。
So this is what God's will is, to have that relationship, that
所
exclusive
以这
relationship
就
with
是
Him.
神的意愿，他们想要
So
这
we
份独一
have
的
to ask
关系。
ourselves, do we have to do what God wants?
所以我们必须要问自己：我们要做神想要的吗？我们必须去做
Krishna
吗？
said to Arjuna, at the end of the Gita, he gave him
可是
a
呢，
very
对阿
long
珍娜
teaching,
说，
18
在
chapters.
伯爵梵歌最
He
后
was
给
discussing
他
a
一
lot of
个非常
topics.
长的
He went into great depth
教导，
about explaining the
讨论了
nature
很多
of
主
the
题，
universe,
很
the
深
nature
的
of
主
the
题，
material creation.
包括宇宙
He also
的
showed him,
本性，
Arjuna, who Krishna
他
truly
也向他
was.
展示了，
He showed him that fraction of himself that
谁是真正的
uplifts the
Krishna
whole of this universal creation.
他向阿周那展示
And
了
after showing him
这
all of
个
that,
神，
describing in detail,
向他展示了这些
he
之
says
后
the，following.
他向他解释了一些
Iti
细节，
gnanam
说
akyatam guyat guyataram maya vimrashayitad asheshena yatichasi tatat
所以我教给
which
你们这
means,
些
and
知
so I
识，
have taught you that knowledge, which is the greatest
这
of
些
all
的冥想这些
mysteries.
知识，做你
Reflecting
认
on
为
it
最好的。
thoroughly, do what you think is
他说我
best.
给了你所有你需要的知
So
识，
he said, I've
所有
given
你
you
需
all
要
the
知道
knowledge
的
that you
你
need.
都知道了，
Everything that you need to know,
至上的知
you've been
识。
given. The supreme knowledge. Now, do what you think is best.
他同样也说，
He also says in the Gita, chapter 18, verse
你的头脑
58,
专注于我，
focus your mind
通
on
过我
me
的
by my
恩典，
grace,
你能
you
超越
shall
所有
overcome
的
all
障碍。
obstacles.
但如果
If,
因为骄傲，你不
He
听从
says,
于我，
however, out of pride, you
你
do
会
not
被毁
listen
灭。
to me, you will be ruined.
所以《罗记》同样也说了这个
So Guruji was saying also
关于这个
about
物质世
this,
界，
about the material
但
world.
他给
When he was giving the commentary on the,
一个
well, he's giving a lecture about the
圣经
Bhakti
评
Sutras.
注的时候，当时他说，当
He
你
said, when
来
you
到
come
这
to that
个，
state of forgetfulness, you are thrown
原谅
yourself completely into
当
the
你来
mercy of
到
Maya. So when you
巴
come
亚
into the
的
mercy
这
of
个世
Maya,
界，
you
你
are
注
meant
定
to
了
suffer.
受罪，
Misery will be your reward.
痛苦将成为你的奖赏。
That's good news, isn't it?
当如果
But whereas a devotee is
奉献
completely
者
depending on his kripa, he can never ever forget
来
about
的
him. For them, each moment, each breath they take
当这
is
个奉献
constantly a
者每一
remembrance
时
of
每一
him.
刻都记着
Each
神，
inspiration,
都在提醒他的
exploration,
时候，
it's a
他
reminding
的
of
爱的
his
时
love.
候，这就告诉了我们
So this
这
is why we
种
talked
独一
just
无
a
二的
little bit
关系。
earlier
当
about
你
that
把这种
exclusivity,
专
with the
注点，
focus,
每个呼
even
吸都专
every
注在它
single
上
breath
面。
is focused onto the Lord himself.
想象这种专注的
Just
强
imagine
度，
the
就
intensity of
像
that focus. It's like
一
a
个
laser
镭
beam.
射，激光镭射一样。所以奎师那
So
说，
Krishna is saying, like,
这是我的
here
建
it
议，
is. Here's my
要
advice.
么采
You
取，
can either
要
take
么
it
不采取
or。leave it.
当然，
Of
后
course,
面
afterwards
他
he
强
highly
烈的建议
recommends
的，阿周那做一些步骤，
Arjuna to take a
一
certain
些
step,
方向
a。certain direction.
现在奎师那
Now
并没有
Krishna is
说
not sitting there like coming from a
我需要你
space of
这样做，
neediness.
我
I
需要
need
你
you to
爱
love
我。
me. You must love me.
他没有那样说。
He's not saying that at all. Earlier on in the Gita, he says in chapter 9, verse 29, I am the same to all beings. There is no
在
one
国家
hated by
梵
me,
歌
nor is there
前
anyone
这章他说
I am
了，
partial to. But those who worship me
我
and have devotion
是所有人
live in
的
me,
中
and I live
心，
in them.
我不会恨任何
So
人，
here
我
he was
也
saying there
我
isn't
特别爱
anybody that
某
he
些人
favors，more
但那
or
些
less.
带着奉献我
I've seen
的，
this in the
我住
relationship
在
with
他们心中，
Guruji.
他们也住在我
He has
心中。
devotees all the way around the world.
所以这里
When one devotee
他说
has a problem
他
with
不
another
是他不
devotee,
更偏爱
he
某些
doesn't say,
人。
yes, I favor you and I don't
我
favor
看
you.
到
He's indifferent to both.
这个关系在咕噜吉
But
的
he
身
might put
上
them together
有些，他
and
有
say, you work out your
全世
problems.
界所有
It's
这
your
些
responsibility.
奉献者，他并没有说我更
But he doesn't
爱
show
你
that,
或更爱他， 但他可能把他们
impartial,
放在一起，说
partial.
你们自己去做你们的问题，是你们自己的
But it
责
also
任。
says here in
但
this
他
verse, but for those
并
that
没
do
有
not pursue that
展示出
relationship
那种
with
偏
that
爱。
supreme being, then what? What does it mean that
但
they
他
will
同
be
时也说
ruined?，
但对那些
In
没有
chapter
接触过
16,
这种
where he talks
关系
very
的
much
人，
about the
代
divine
表什么
and the
呢？
demonic qualities
毁灭意味着
of
什
the
么？
individual. He says in chapter 16,
当
verse
奎什
9,
纳
10,
谈了
and
很
16,
多神
those who
圣
have ruined
和
themselves
邪恶
and
的
have
品
little
质，
intelligence.
他在
Little
不在梵根
intelligence
里面
means
说，
what?
那些毁灭了自
Acting
己
from that
的
state
人，
of
他们没
egoic
有多少
identity.
智慧，
I am my mind, I am my body, I am my senses.
就是会通常
It's that
从小我的
perception of life
角度去
from the
行
ego.
动。我是我的头脑，我是我的感
And
官
have，little
这就是
intelligence
他们
hold
对
these
生命的
views,
感知，
hostile to all. They
来自
perform
于小
cruel
我的
deeds
感
and
知。
bring destruction to the world. Filled with insatiable
他们
desires,
对很多东西都
due
会
to
产生敌
delusion,
意，
they stubbornly hold to false ideas. They act with insincere intentions
因
based on
为
deceit,
虚
pride,
幻的
and
感觉，他
passion.
们有很多错误的认知，
Bewildered by so many
把这
fantasies,
些
caught by their
建立
net of
在
delusion,
骄傲
and addicted to
之上。
sensual enjoyments, they fall down into hell.
这个世
So Krishna
界
is stating here very clearly that you have
因
the
为
right
他
to
们对
choose,
感官的迷恋而
but there are clear
跌入地
consequences
狱。
depending on
所以他
what
奎什
choice
纳
you
说，你
make.
有权利做选择，但有结果的，
You can either choose to
基于
have
你
a
的选
relationship
择。
with God Himself or with His material
你要么
creation,
选择
which
与
Krishna
神
says
有
is
关
part
系，
of Him. It's a very
或者
tiny
是与他
part.
的物质的世
You
界。
have a
奎什纳
relationship
说
with
这
His
是
material
他的一部
creation
分，
or
这是
Him.
非常小的一部分。
Ultimately, that's the only choice you have to make. There's only
你
one
与
choice.
这个物质世界有关
ultimately
系，
in
或
life.
者是与他，这就是你的选择。最终
But
其实只有这一个选
Krishna
择。
actually
但奎
says
什纳事实上说过，
you have the right to
你
choose,
有权利做选择，
but if you don't choose to align with God's
但如
will,
果你不与神的意愿达
your
成一致，
experience will be that nature,
你
let's
的
say
经
Mother
历将
Nature,
是，
and
比如
all
说
the
大
laws
自
that
然，
govern this universe that also
所有
govern
统
us
这个宇宙的
will
法则同
compel
样也
each and every
统治我
individual
们，
to
将迫
act
使每一
according
个
to their
人
nature.
按照他们的本
I'll
性
go into
行
this a
事。
little bit later.
我这个会稍微再讲一下。
But one will be, let's say,
但一
forced
个人
according to one's
会
nature
被
to
迫
act
使按照
in
自己的本
specific
性
ways.
去行动，做特定的
And
行
in
为。
verse 16 there, it says, being
在
bewildered
第
by
16
so
章
many
中说，他
fantasies,
说
caught by the net of
被
delusion,
如此
and
多的幻
addicted to
想所迷
sensual
惑，
enjoyments.
被迷惑的网，
There are many types of
并沉
addiction that
迷
we
于基
can
本
have
的
in
享
this
受
world.
有很多我们在这个世界上可能沉迷的东
Computer
西，
games,
电脑游
YouTube
戏、
food.
YouTube
Anybody been
食
addicted
物
to food?
有人沉迷于食
Smoking
物吗？
Sex,
吸烟、性爱、
films, TV,
电影、
music,
电视、音乐、
drugs.
毒品，
Pick your addiction. There's one for
选
everybody.
择你的沉迷，每个人都可能有。
Shopping. How about window
购物。
shopping, Mataji's?
橱窗购物怎么样，女士们？
Amazon Prime is the next window shopping.
亚
It's
马
very quick.
逊
One
Prime
click.
是下一个橱窗
You've
购
just
物，它
purchased
非常
something.
快，一
Netflix.
键点击。你刚刚买的东
We
西
can go on and on. There's so many
，Netflix等
different
等，我们
addictions.
可以不停的说下去，有很
Through our
多的沉
senses,
迷
we。can get attached to this or
通
attached
过我
to
们的
that.
感官，我们可以
It can
沉
be
迷于这，
endless.
沉迷于那，它可以是无穷无尽
Oh,
的。
yes, the pleasure of the senses. Give me. Yes, I got this.
人
Now I
类
want this,
的
and now it's
乐
gone.
趣，
Oh,
我
I
想
want
要这，我
something
想要
else.
那个，等
And
等
it's。a continual game, like
这
running
是一
after
个持
that,
续的
that
游
state
戏
of，enjoyment,
不停的
having
追逐
something,
那
getting
种
something.
想要拥有的东西，得到一些东西。
So anyone at some point in your
所
life,
以有
you
些
feel that your
人在
life
你的
was a
生命
living
当
hell?
中，你感觉到你的生命是一个活生生的地狱吗？
You feel that, oh my God,
你
that
觉
my
得
life is
哦，
hell.
我的上帝，
Let
我
me
的生
out
活
of
是
this
地狱，
life. I've had enough.
让我摆脱这种生
Have
活，
you been
我
there?
已经受够了。你有过那种感受吗？
I met an author many years ago. His name was Neil
我很多
Donald
年前
Walsh.
遇到过一个作家，
And I
他
went
的
to
名字
Scotland
是尼尔·唐
to
纳
be
德
there for a
沃什
weekend.。
我去了
to
苏格
listen to
兰，在那
him.
里度过了
And
一个周末，
He was telling
去
us the story
听他
about
讲。
how
他向我
in
们讲
his
述了他
life
的
he was
生
very
活，
in
他
a
的
good
状
state.
态
He had a
非常的好
family with children,
他
he
有
had the
一
house,
个
the
孩
car,
子，
he
有
had
家
everything that he
庭，有
wanted.
房子，有
He had
车
a good job in
他
a
有
radio
一
show.
切他想有的东西。
And he
他在
lost
广播
everything.
节目中有一个好的工作，然后
He
他
lost
失去
his
了一
job,
切，
he lost his
他
wife,
失去
he
了工
lost the
作，
kids,
失
he
去了
lost
妻
the
子、
house.
孩
He
子
lost、everything.
房子，他失去了
He
一
ended up
切，
being homeless
他最终
and used to
无
live
家
in a
可归。
park and used to sleep under
曾经住在
cardboard
一个
boxes,
公园里
in
面，
cardboard boxes.
睡在一个纸板
And
箱
used to
里
collect the
面。
newspapers to line the
他
bottom
曾
of the
经收集
cardboard
这些
box
报
so
纸，
that he
铺在
wasn't
纸
so
板上，
cold
所以
and
他
wet
就
on
不
the
会太
floor.
冷。
One day when he was
有一天，
collecting the newspapers,
当
he
他
saw
在
an
收集报
advert
纸的时候，
in
他
one
看
of
到
the
一个广告，
newspapers for like a guy on the radio presenter. So he applied for the job.
一
He
个
got the
他申
job.
请的这份工作，
And
一个
he
广
was so
播
happy
节目中
because
的工作，
he
他
had the
非常开
chance
心，
now to get off the
因为他
streets.
现在有一个机会能够
So
离开
he-
街头，
He's back into work.
所
He
以
manages to
他
get
又回
himself
到
an
了工作
apartment.
岗位上，
He
他
seems
又
to be
想方设
going
法给自己买
down
了
the right
公
road
寓
of。life.
他似乎正
And
在
then
走
all of
上
a sudden he gets fired.
正确的人生道路，然后
Just
突
like
然
this,
他
out of the
又
blue,
被
he
解
gets
雇了，
fired. So he gets so angry
所以他
when
非
he
常的
when he
生
gets that
气。
message. He's
当
studying
他
at
收
home.
到
He
那
gets
条
that
消息，
message.
他
He's
是
been fired.
他在家里面，他
He's
被
so
解雇
angry. He
了，
doesn't know what to
他
do.
非常
And
生气，
he's
不知道该怎么做。
arguing with God.
他在与
Why?
上
Why
帝
did you do
争
this?
执，为什么
What do you
为什么你要
want?
做这
And he
个？
gets his yellow
你想
legal
要什
pad.
么？
He grabs his
然
pen
后
and he
他拿
starts
起他
writing
的
to God.
便签簿，拿起笔，开始给上帝写信
He。wasn't expecting an answer
他并没有期待
because he
回
asked
答
God, "Why? What do
因
you
为他问
want?"
上帝为什么
And God
你
said,
要想要什
"Are
么
you？" sure
上
you
帝
really
说
want an answer, or are you just
你
venting?
真的你想要一个答案
And
吗？
it
还是
began
说
a
你是在发泄
conversation. Many？
然后
books
开
were
始了一
written.
场对话，写了很多书。
And one of his books were,
他的
"What
其
does
中一
God
本
want?"
书是《上帝想要什么》。
Well, we can see from the Gita.
但我们可以说
Clearly
从
wants a
可以
relationship.
梵歌中可以看到，他
The
显
question
然他
is,
想要一
do
种
we
关
also
系
want that。
问题
relationship?
是我们是否也想要这份
It's
关
either
系
a
呢？
yes or no.
我们看到
But
他们
sometimes we go,
对这个
yes,
我们
but
可能说
I
是
also
的，
want
或者是
another
不是。
relationship. I
我
want
同时
two.
也想要另外一份关系，
Because
我
many
想要
times
两个
people come for。
因为
darshan and
很
say,
多时候
"Guruji,
人们来到达
please
山
can
的
you
时
help
候
me，find
他们说：“咕噜吉，请你帮我
my
找到
lover,
我的完美的爱
Mr.
人。
Right or Mrs. Right?" So Krishna has given the
所以
advice over
Krishna
this
给了
18
这个建
chapters.
议，
And
在
he's
第
told
18
Arjuna,
章，
now
他告
let's
诉
be
了
clear.
阿朱那，
What
他
do you
说：“让我们
choose?
清楚你想选择什么。
Now, if you live life, you identify
如果
with the mind, the
你
body,
过
the
着生活，你认
ego.
同你的思想、身体
It could
是
be very
自
easy
我，
that you make the
你
wrong
就很
decision.
容易做错误的决定。
Ultimately, this whole journey of life,
最终，
It's
这
a
整个
journey
人
of love.
生就是一个爱
that's
的
all
旅
it's
程，
about. It's a journey of love.
就是
Did you ever hear the song, "What is
你曾经
love?
听过一首
Baby,
歌
don't
吗？
hurt me.
什么是
Don't
爱？
hurt me
宝宝，不要伤害
no
我，不要
more.
伤害
What is
我。
love? Dun, dun,
什么是
dun,
爱？
dun, dun, dun. By Hadaway. Horrible song. Hated.
Hathaway 的一首歌，非常难听的一首歌，我讨厌它。
So people are searching for love.
所以人们在寻找爱。
But the thing is, if they're coming from
但
that
问题
state
是，
of the egoic identity,
如果他
the
们来自于
personality,
自
the
我身
mind,
份的认
they
定，
often search
自
for
我
it
的
in so
个
many
性，
wrong places.
他们会在错的地方去寻找。
And some people might even think,
有些人甚至可
unconditional
能
love,
认
does
为
it really
无
exist?
条件的爱
Can't do.
不存在。
Of all the places I've looked in, it's
我
not
看过
possible.
的，我寻找过
When I
所有
went
的
to
地方
Mauritius
都
many
不
years
可
ago
能
in。
在我
2008,
2008年
There
前
was
去毛
one
里
guy
求
that
斯
was
的时候
there with，me,
有一个人
and
和我在一
he
起。
was, I think, a year or two younger
我
than
想
me.
他可
So he
能
was
一两
like
岁，比我年轻，所以他大
29.
概29岁那个时候。
And I asked him, he asked me, like, how many relationships
他
have
问
you
我
had? So
你
I
有
was
过
counting
多
them
少
on
段
my
感情
my
关
one
系，
hand.
所以我用一只手在数。
And then he said to me,
他对我说
guess how many you think I've had? And I：“ was
猜
like,
猜我有多少段关
I
系
don't know, you know.
我说：“
So
哦，
I
不
guess.
知
And
道
I。was like,
他说：“猜一猜。”
10
我说：“10个、
15. He says, no,
15。”
no,
我说：“
no.
不，
More. I said, 50.
更多。”
No.
我
More.
说：“50，
100.
不
More.
更多100，
200.
更
More.
多200，
I was like,
更多
300. More.
300吗？
I was like,
更多
I。was thinking, oh my God, this is
我
this
想，哦，这
possible?
个这可能
This
吗
is like I've had 700
他
relationships,
说：“我有700段关系。”
and this guy's like not even 30.
这个家伙甚
And
至
I was
还
trying
没
to
有
do
到
the maths,
岁
you
呢，
know, like, okay,
我试
he
着
went
做
through
这个数
school,
学，
and then after
他
that,
上
he was
学，
probably
然
like a
后
certain
那
age,
之
and then
后
I
他
was thinking,
可
oh my
能到
God,
了一定年龄，我在想
is this
哦，
even physically possible?
这甚至在物理
And
层
he
面
was
是可能的
completely
吗？
depressed,
他
utterly
完
depressed.
全
He tried
抑郁
everything
沮丧，
that he
他
could
试了
in
一
a
切
human
在人
relationship,
际关系当
and
中，
for him, it was
对他来
completely
说
meaningless.
这完全是没
There
有
was
意
no
义
love
的，
into it whatsoever. I
没
mean,
有
that
爱，
was his experience.
这是他的经历。
So what experience are we
所以
seeking for?
那么我们在寻找什么呢？
What kind of love is that you're longing for?
什么样的爱是你渴望的呢？
Love that brings pain, temporary happiness,
爱
sadness,
带来痛苦、暂时的
separation,
幸福、悲伤、分
or an
离，
eternal love that brings peace, true joy
还是
and
永恒的
bliss?
爱带来和平、真正的快乐和幸福？
So Krishna is asking and showing Arjuna,
所以奎师那在问，
having had that long
并
conversation,
向阿周
what
那
is it
表
that
示
you want? Many times when
你
people
真的
come
想要什么？很
to
多时
meet
候，当人们
Guruji,
来到
Paramahansa Vishwananda, he
咕
asks
噜
them,
来见
what do
咕
you
噜吉的
want?
时候，他问他们：你想要什么？
Sometimes when they ask him, are you my
有些时
guru?
候，他们
He
问你
says,：what does your
你是
heart
我的咕噜吉吗？
say?
他说
What does your：heart
你的
feel?
心怎么说？你的心什么
He
感
wants
觉？
them to answer their
他
own
希望
questions.
他们自己回答他们的问题。
I know a lot of times some of the
我
devotees
知道
they
很多
ask
时候，有
Guruji,
些奉献
Guruji,
者问
can
咕
you
噜
tell
吉，
me
咕
this
噜
or
吉，
can you tell me
你可以
that?
告
And he
诉我
just
这，
doesn't
告诉我那
answer.
吗？他
When
并
they
不
get
回
to a
答。
certain stage in their
当他
relationship
们
with
到达
him,
关系的某个阶段时，他
he
只
doesn't want
是
to have to answer all the external
不回答，他
questions.
并不想要回答
It's
所有
time
的
for them
问
to
题。
begin to go inside
是时候让他们开始
and
走进内
feel
心，
truly for themselves.
真正的为自己感受
What is the right way?
什么是正确的方式，
How do I navigate?
我应该如何的导航。
So the whole of humanity can put
所以
themselves
整
in
个人
Arjuna's
类
place.
把放在阿朱那
If
的
we're
那个位置，
conditioned to
如果
having
我
a
们
relationship with Krishna's material creation,
我们
with God's
把
material
我
creation,
们去拥有奎师那的物质
then
的
in
创
the
造的
Gita
世界
he's
建立
showing
关
us
系，
how we
然
can
后在
navigate
梵歌中，
out
他向
of
我们
that
展示了如何摆脱这种
and
关
come to
系，
having a relationship with him.
并与他建立一份关系。
And so he provides many points on how
所
to do
以
this.
他提
For
供了很
example,
多建议
In，chapter 9,
比
verse
如
27,
在
he
第
says, whatever
9
you
章
do,
27节，
whatever you
他说：
eat,
不论你做什么，
whatever you
无
offer in
论你吃什
sacrifice,
么，无
whatever
论你
you
在
give away,
奉
whatever
献什么，
austerity
无论你
you
放弃什么，
practice,
无
O
论你
Arjuna, do
练
it
习
as
什
an
么，
offering to me.
阿朱那都将那些作为奉献，
So he's
奉献给我。
showing here,
所以
it doesn't
他在这
matter what
里
you
表
do,
明，无
make it
论你
an
做什
offering
么，
to the Lord.
你都可以将它
Everything that
作
you
为对
do.
主的奉献。
When Guruji was in
当咕
Vrindavan
噜吉在温达文
and
的时
he
候
was，doing pilgrimage,
他在
one of the
做朝圣，
pilgrimages,
其中一次
or
朝
probably
圣
more,
很可能更多。
the Matajis went out and they all did
一个
their
女士出去
shopping.
了，他们
They're all very
去
excited.
购
They're coming
物，
together in
他们
groups,
都很
and
兴
they're going
奋，
out
他
down to the
们
Loi
成群结
Bazaar,
队
and they were
的住
buying
在
their
一起，
saris
他
and
们
their
去
earrings
了
and all
市
these,
场，他们买纱丽、耳
wonderful
环等等
things, yeah?
所有这些美妙的东西。
And then they came back, and Guruji could
然后
see
他们
that
回来，
they
咕
were
噜
very
吉可以
happy.
看到
They'd
他
all been
们都
doing
很
their
开心
shopping.。And
在
then
购
Guruji
物
said, okay,
然后咕噜就说：“好，
what did you do? And they was telling him, yeah,
你
we
们做了
we
什
went
么
this, we？”
他
went
们告诉
there,
他：“
and
哦，我
we
们
did
去了
this.
这里，去
And
那里，
Guruji says,
我们
okay,
做了
well,
这个。”他
tomorrow
们
I
说
want you to go out：“
咕噜就
shopping.
说，
And they were
明天我想
happy.
让你们出
He
去
says,
购物，
but
他们很开心。
for the
但
deities,
是
go and buy
去
for the
为神购
deities.
物，去为
So
神
he
买
used
东
exactly
西。
the same thing that
所
they
以
were
他
doing.
用
They
了
love to go
同
out
样一件
shopping,
事情，他们喜
buy
欢去购
beautiful
物，
things, but
买
he used
美好的
that
东西，
and
但他
put
用
the
了这个，
focus
把这个
purchase
重
for the
点放在
deities.
了神身上。
And so Guruji is very clever with things like this.
所以咕噜
He
吉非
uses
常
that
的聪
same
明，
interest, that same
他用了
enthusiasm,
同样
but
的
to
兴趣、
focus
同
it
样的
towards
热
God.
情，但
So
将
it's
它
exactly
专
like
注
you
在
in
神
this
身
verse.
上。所以
Whatever
就
you
像这
do,
里，无论你做什么，
whatever you offer in sacrifice,
无
do it
论
as an offering
你
to me.
奉献什么，都将它作为对我
So
的
he
奉献。
stands ready.
所
He's
以
waiting for that
他
relationship. God is
等
extremely,
着这份
extremely
关系
patient.，
上帝非
He's
常
been
非
waiting
常
for a
耐
very,
心，
very long time.
他等了很长一段时间。
And does God love us any more if we don't choose him, or if we
如
do
果
choose
我
him?
们不选择他，他会爱我们吗？
Krishna says in chapter 9,
可是
verse
那在
29,
第9
I am the
章第
same
20
to
节
all beings.
29节中说：“
There is
我
no
对
one
所有
hated
众
by
生都是
me,
一样的，
nor is there anyone I am
我不恨
partial
任
to.
何人，我
But
也
those
没有
who
偏
worship
爱。
me
但
with
那些
devotion
虔诚的崇
live
拜
in
我的
me
人
and，I live in them.”
他们住在我里面，我也住在他们心
When
里。
Guruji was giving the commentary on the
当
Narada
咕噜
Bhakti
吉
Sutras, he said,
对
God
那
doesn't
达
feel
巴克
like
的
people feel, you know.
进行注解的时候，他说：“
When he's saying
他说上帝
about
不觉
this,
得人
God
们
dislikes the
知道一
proud,
切。当他说
but
的时候，
pleased
上
with
帝
those
喜
who are
欢骄傲
humble.
的人，
It
但
sounds
喜
like
欢
we are talking
谦卑
church
的人。”这
language, no?
听起来像
God
我们
hates
在
the
谈论
sinners.
教会语言，
He is not
不，
partial
上
to
帝
that. He is not partial and
上帝
subjected
不
to
讨厌
feeling
罪人，他也
love
不偏
and
袒，
hate.
他也不，并且受到爱恨情仇的影响。
Narada is specifically reminding that egoism
那
is the
大家特
greatest
别在
obstacle
提
for
醒，
attaining God
利己主义
realization.
是最大的
It
获
is
得
the
神的
greatest
障碍。
obstacle for Bhagavan
这
to
是
give one
佛
his
家
darshan.
凡给一个人的达
He's
成的最大的
reminding
障
that you
碍
have to be。devoid,
他
you
提
have to
醒
be
你
free
必
of
须是
egoism, you have to cleanse your heart,
摆
you
脱
have
利
to
己主
purify
义，
yourself.
你必须净化你的
In the
心，你必
presence of
须在
egoism,
利己主义
your
面前
heart
净
is
化你
already
自己
full.，
你的
Your
心
mind is saturated.
你的思想已经满了你自
then
己，
God becomes difficult to be
那么
concentrated
神就
upon.
很难再成
He
为你的
said
注意
first,
点。
the
他首
more
先
one is
说，
free from egoism, the
一个
more
人
the
越
heart will
摆
be
脱
filled
利
with
己主
Him.
义，他的
The
心就
more the
越
grace
容
will
易
start to reflect.
被神充满，
There is
恩
only
典
one
就越
thing
会
that
开始
prevents
反映
that,
出
and it's
出
the
来。只有
ego.
一件事阻止了这一点，那就是自我。
Very hard to have a relationship with God if there's still the
如果
ego
仍然存
present.
在小我，就很难与上帝建立关系。
It blocks
他会
many,
阻
many
挡
intentions,
许
many,
多
many
意图、许多
acts towards wanting to have a relationship
行
with the
为
divine. Pride
与神
is
建立
one of
关系，
the biggest
而骄傲
handbrakes
是最
on
大
your
的一
relationship
个
with
障
God.
碍。
So God doesn't love one
所
more
以
and
神
one less.
不会更偏爱
But those
我
who
更不
turn
偏
to
爱某
Him
些人，
sincerely,
但是
He
那
turns
些
to
真
them.
诚
He
的
stands ready and
转向
waiting,
他的人，
ready and
他也会
waiting to
转向
have
他
that
们，
relationship.
他准备好了，等待着这份关系。
And He reflects that willingness.
如果你不
If
这
you're
样
not
做，
really willing,
他就会反映
He
出这
will
份
also
意
know
愿。如
if
果你
you're
真的
willing
愿
or
意，他也
not.
会知道你是真的
There
愿
have
意
been
还是
many
不愿意。
examples of that.
有很多例子，
I told this story before. There was a lady
我曾经
that
讲
was
过，
here
有
many
一个
times,
女士来过这里
and
很多次，
every time she was in the
每一次
lobby, Guruji would
她在
walk
大
straight
厅
past her.，
咕噜基都会径直
Ignore
的
her
从她身边
completely.
走过，完全无视她。
And first time, second time, third time, she was
一
a
次
little bit、
两
upset.
次、三次，她
Have
有
you
点
ever
不高兴
experienced。that?
你有没有经
Where
历
you
过
think
呢？
Guruji is going to talk to you and he just
当
walks past
你
you,
以为咕
completely
噜基要
blanks
跟你说
you,
话，
as
而
if you
他
don't
只是
even
从你身边
exist.
经过，完全把你
And
当
then
做
maybe
空
he
白
talks。to the person next to you, but
然
he
后也
doesn't
许
look
他
at you
可
at
能
all.
和你旁边的人说话，但他完全不和你说话
Some。years after I was initiated as a
几年
Swami,
前，
he
当
always
我
used to
被起
used
引
to say,
成为
"Oh, Swami,
Swami 之前，他总是
Swami,
经常说：“哦，Swami 啊。”
Swami." He would play the game like he'd forgotten my
他
name.
会玩这个游戏，就像他忘
Like,
记
who
了我
are
的
you?
名字。
Yeah, you live in my
好像是，你
house
是
like
谁？
for many years. I initiated
你住在
you.
我的房子里
Swami,
面很多年，我需要你
Swami,
起名了你。
So if we're not sincere, if we don't show
所以
that
如果我们不
willingness
真
to
诚，
have that
不表
relationship
现
with
出
him,
这份
it will not be
诚意、
reflected from his
这
side.
份意愿，他也不
But
会
if
反
we
映出
do
这份
turn
意愿。
to the
但如果
Lord
我们
with that
确
willingness, with
实
that sincerity, it will be
没有
reflected
诚
back
意和
many
意
more
愿的时
times.
候，会被更大的反射出
And
来。
God will not force himself onto anybody
上帝不
and
会
say,
强迫
you
自
have to
己
love
对
me.
任何人说你必须爱我。
Guruji said before, you
然
can't
后
put a gun
乌
to
鲁吉
somebody's
曾经
head
说过
and，tell them
你不
that you
能
have
对
to love
把
them.
用枪对着别人说你必须爱
I'm
我。
curious. Did you
我
ever
很好
try
奇
to，force anybody
你
to love
是否
you?
曾经强迫任何人爱你
Or
呢？
maybe control somebody to love
或
you?
者控制别人爱你？
It doesn't work.
这
If you
并
have
行
tried
不通。如果你试过
For，sure, it doesn't work.
那
And
肯
I
定
know
行不
people
通
do。try. There are
我
so many subtle ways
有
to
认识
control
有些
people, isn't
人
there?，
尝试过，有很多微妙
And
的
it's a
方法
game.
去控制
We
别
try to
人，这是一
control
个游
people.
戏，我们试图控制别人。
But to love somebody truly, without
在
any
真正的
control,
爱一个人的情况下，不
Sometimes
去
that's
控制
scary.
的情况下，这是
There was a
有些
beautiful
时候是
question in
很
one of
可
the
怕的。有一
online
个
darshans. And
在
somebody asked
网上
Guruji,
搭讪的时候，有个人问
Guruji
咕噜吉说：“问咕噜吉，
how can I love like you?
咕噜吉，我如何才能像你一样去爱呢？”
It was a very beautiful question.
是一个非常美妙
And
的
Guruji was
问
quite
题。
surprised
咕
actually
噜吉
that
非
somebody
常的
asked such a question
震
like
惊，
this.
其实上会有
He
人这
said,
样
well,
问。
well, that's not
他
easy
说：“哦，
to
这
love
个
like
并
that.
不容易，
It's very
像这样
hard.
子爱非常难
Takes a
的，
lot of courage.
需要
You
很
have
多
to
勇
give
气。
completely of yourself.
你必须要
Completely.
完全的
Have no
把自己
expectation.
奉献出去，没有期望，
You give everything, the person
你把
might
一切
walk out anytime.
把一切给这个人，这个人可能随时可能离
And
开。
that's not easy, to give oneself
这并
fully,
不容易，完全的把自己
but
奉
to
献
love
出去，
without any expectation.
但去爱没有
give
任何的
completely
期待，完全的付出。
That's how we can enter
这
into
就
that
是我
relationship
们
with
如
God.
何能够进
Without
入
any
与神的这份
expectation.
关系，在
Expectation
没有任
comes
何
from the mind.
期望的情况下，
If you don't
这
have a mind,
期待
there
来
will
自
be
于
no
头脑。如果你
expectation.
没有头脑，就不会有期待了。
When you're completely in your heart,
当你
you
完全
forget
在你
about
的
your
心里的
mind.
时候，你会忘记你的头脑。
When people meet Guruji, he's
当
so
人
in
们遇
his
到咕噜
heart.
吉的时候，他
When
是
they come
如
into
此的
that
在自己
field
的
of-
内心。当
of
他
his
们进入内心的时
He
候，
asks them, what's your name?
他问他们
They say, I：“
你
don't
的
know.
名字是什么？”他们会说：“哦，我不知道。
He says, what do you mean you don't know your name? ”
他
They
说
say,：“
你
no.
什么意思？你不知道你的名字？”他们说：“
They
不，
forget their names completely.
他们忘记他们的名字，
Their mind is completely
他们的头脑完 完全关掉了。
Because they're in his love.
因为他们在他们的
They
爱
forget
里，
everything.
他们忘记了一切。
And when you're truly in your heart,
当你
there
在
isn't
你的
that
内心的时
expectation
候，
there.
就
There
没
is
有那
just
种期
loving
待
for
了，
the sake of loving.
只是为了爱而爱。
So Krishna gives ultimately
所以 Krishna
one
最终
choice.
给出了一个
You
选
want to
择。
have a relationship with my material creation, this universe,
你想
very
与我的物
beautiful. We
质
have
创造
lots
建
of
立关
trees
系
and， valleys,
这个宇宙
sunshine, beautiful
非
people.
常美丽的
Or you
山
want
谷
to have a
阳光，
relationship
美丽
with
的
me.
人，或者你想与我建立关系。
So only those who are identified with their ego,
所
with the
以
mind and the
只有那
body,
些认同他们的
They will
小我，并把思想放在身体上
be
的人，
ruled
他们会
by one thing often that gets them into trouble.
被一个
That's
事
called
情统
desire.
治。这通常他们会并陷入困境
Desire，
那就
to
是欲望。
experience, to
他们
experience
渴
many
望
things.
去体
We
验。
talked about
我们
addictions earlier on.
我们
And there are
前
so
面
many
谈过
things that we
沉
could be
迷。
attached to.
这一生中，我们也可
in
以
this life.
执着于很多事情。
And as we go through our ages, we
随
can be
着
attached
年
to
龄的
different
增长，
things.
我们可以执着于不同的事
I'll
情。
talk about some of those.
我会说一些。
So, being in this world,
所以
if
在这个世界上，如果
we have to, or perhaps
我们
align with the will of
必须
God, are
与
we
上帝的
free
意
to
志保持
choose,
一致，
really?
我们真的可以自由选择吗？
Do we have free will?
我们
This
真
is
的
a
有自由
question
意志吗？这是一个
that's
问
been
题，
asked many times.
被问过很多次的问题。
Krishna says to Arjuna,
可是呢，对阿珍娜说，
Ishvara sarva bhutanam hrideshe rujana tishtati brahmayam sarva bhutani yantra hrudhani mayaya. Meaning the Lord abides in the heart of every being,
神
Arjuna.
居住在每一个
By
人的
his
心中。
power,
阿珍娜
he controls
通过他
all
的
their
力量，
movements
他
through
控
life,
制着他们一
as
生
if
中
they
所
were
有的行
seated on a
动，
machine.
就像他们坐在一个机器上一样。
So most people,
所
they
以
love
很
to
多
be able
人
to do what they want, when they want, where
他
they
们
want,
希望
with whom
他
they
们
want. And they
想
like to
在
do
任
it
何
how
时
they
间、
want to
任
do
何
it.
地方做他们的事情，以他们想要的方式。
Guruji said about free will, it's a bit like
古鲁基说讲过
if you
自
have
由
a
意志，
pole
就有点
and a
像
rope and a
像你有一
cow.
个
The
杆
cow is
子、一
tied
个
through the
绳
nose
子和
to
一
the
头牛
pole，with the
牛
rope.
被用
And
绳
you
子
knock the post in,
绑在这
and the cow
个
only
杆
has a
子上
certain。amount of freedom to move,
这个牛是有一定
the length
的
of that
自由
rope.
的度，
so it can walk
这个绳
around
子的长
and
度，
anywhere
它
within
可
that
以在这个
circumference.
这个
But it's not very free.
周围运动，但是它不是
And he
很
says
自
this is
由。
how humans
他说
are.
这就是人类
You have a
像人
relative
类一样，
freedom.
也有相对的自由。
Now, in some of the Gita
现在
verses, it could
在
indicate
国
that
家
there
梵
is a
歌的有
certain
些
amount
诗
of
句当
free
中
will, because
会表明
Krishna
我们
says
有
in
一些
chapter
一定
6,
程
verse
度的自由意
5,
志。
one should
可
raise
是呢，在
oneself by
第六
one's
章
own
第5节中
mind
说，一个人应该通过自己的思
and
想
not
来
allow
提升
oneself
自
to
己，
fall.
不要让
For
自
a
己
controlled
陷
mind is
入
one's friend,
受控制的
but an
思想。
uncontrolled mind
受
is
控制的
one's
思想是一
enemy.
个人的朋友，而一个不受控制的思想
It
是一个
seems
人
to
的敌人。
indicate that up to a
这似
certain
乎表
level,
明，在
there
一
is a
定程度
certain
上
amount of free will
有一定程度的自由意志，
by the individual's choice.
通过个人的选择，
Spiritually, we can raise ourselves
我们可以提升自己的
through
灵性
that
程度，
conscious application of
通过
effort.
有意识的努力来提高自己。
And also in chapter 18, verse 58,
同
he
样在第
says,
18章第
Focus your mind
58
on
节
me, by
中，他
my
说
grace you：“
通
shall
过
overcome all
我的
obstacles.
恩典，将你的思
So
想
it
集中在
indicates
我
that if
身
one
上。”
consciously
这将
focuses the
将
mind
克
on
服
the
所有的
Lord,
困难，所以他表明，如果一个人
using
有
one's
意识的
efforts,
将
one's
集中在
will
神
to
身上
focus，the
用
mind,
自己的努力和意志来集中思想，
we have the ability to either
我们
focus
就
or
有
not.
能力集中或不集
That's
中。
one thing.
这是我
We have
们
that
可以选
choice.
择的一件
We
事。
focus or
我
not.
们有选择，
We do a japa or not. We come to the
做
temple
加
prayers or
帕或
not.
者不加帕，我们来寺庙或者不来寺庙，
But we have a choice.
但我们有选择的。
But the Lord says, if you
但
continuously
神说，
focus the mind on me,
如果
you
你
will
不停地
overcome
把
challenges.
头
It's
脑
not
住
by
在我身
our
上，你就会
efforts
克服
that
困
we
难。这不是
overcome
我们
those
的努力，
challenges. It's because the mind is focused
而
in
是
the right
因为
place
我
on
们的
Him.
头脑集中
That
在
He gives
正
you
确
the
的位置，
capacity to overcome
他
the
给了你
challenges.
这样的能力去克服挑
We
战
can get
挑
caught
战。
into a lot of traps
我
in
们
this
可能会
material
陷
life.
入物质生活中
But
许
if
多
the
陷
focus
阱，
somewhere else,
但如果你的注意力集中在其
your
他
mind
地
will
方，
not get
你
invested
的
and caught
头
by
脑
these.
就不会
Because the
被
mind
这
is
些
somewhere
陷
else.
阱
It's
所吸
focused
引
in。another
因为几
place.
年前有人问思想，
Years ago,
几年前
somebody asked a very interesting
有
question
人
to
问
Guruji
过
in
一个非
Satsang.
常有意思的问题，
They asked Guruji,
他们问咕噜
if we
基，
put in 100% of our effort,
如果我们投
so
入
it's
100%
about
的努力，
focusing our mind, all our effort, all of
用
our
我们所有的
time,
努力，我们的
we
注意
put
力，我们所
100%
有
of
的
our
时间
effort in to attain
如果我们投
God.
入
Is it
100%的
enough
努
to
力
attain
来
God?
征达上帝，这足以
Guruji said,
征达上
"No."
上帝吗？咕噜说不，
He said, because
他说因
if you
为
put your 100%
如果
in,
你
your
全
full
力以赴地
effort,
投入
everything
100%
that you
的
try
努
to
力，
do,
每一件
that's
事你尝试做
25% of the
的，
journey.
这也只是
He
25%
says, but
的
if
旅
you
程。
put
他
in your
说，但如果
100%
你真
sincerely,
诚的
it's
投入
really your
100%的努力，
so that's 25% of the journey.
这也只
He
是
says the guru
25%。
puts in 50%,
而
God puts in 25%.
咕噜投入50%， 上
So
帝投入
that you're carried the
25%，
rest of the way, the rest of the journey.
这样你就可以完成剩下
It's a
的
bit
旅
like
程。
this, and an analogy for
有点
this would
像这
be
样，
there's a man in prison
有一个比例，
and he
一
can't
个
get
人
out. The walls are
在
too high.
监
And
狱
he's
里，
tried,
他出不去，
he's
墙太
tried
高
running,
了，
jumping
尝
up,
试
you
过
know,
很多
getting to
次
the top of the wall, but he
跑快
can't make it.
跳到墙顶，但他做不到。
So one night when it's dark, his two
所以有一
friends
天
come.
晚上天黑了，他的2个朋友来
They
了，
place a couple of ladders against the wall, and they climb
他
up
们
and
在
they're
墙上放
over the
了
wall.
梯子，
They say, hey,
他们
Fred,
翻过去了，说：“哦
it's
，Fred，
us.
是我们。”
And Fred wakes up, and he sees his
Fred
friends
醒过
leaning
来，
over
他
the
看到
wall.
他的朋
Come
友
on, come
靠
on.
在墙
We
上，
can
说：“
get you
来
out
吧
of，here.
我们带你出去。”
So Fred, he's tried
所以
many
Fred
times. He's not
已
been
经
able to
尝
do
试
it
过
so
很多
far.
次，他都
He
没有
runs full
能
speed.
够
He
做成
jumps。up.
他全速
He
奔
just
跑
about，grabs the
跳起
hands of
来
his，two friends, and they start pulling him up.
他
One is pulling
拉
more,
住他
one
的
less,
朋友
but
的
they
手
both pull him over
另
the
外一
wall.
个
He's free from the
他们
prison.
2个都拉着他逃离了
In
这个
this
监狱。
case, the two friends would be the guru
在这个
and
比例
God,
里面，这2个朋友就是咕噜和上
pulling
帝，
this Fred out of material
Fred
creation.
从物质世界中拉出来了。
So the difficulty in determining whether we have
所以
free will or not is a delicate
确定我们
topic,
是否有自由意
actually.
志是一个很困难、很微妙的话题。
And it's something that's been debated about for as long as humanity
自
have
从人类
existed.
存在以来，就一直在存在争议的话题。
So here, in this verse, it
所以
says the Lord abides in the
这
heart
节
of
经
every
文中，他
being.
说，神住在每一个人的心
By his
中，
power, he controls all their
通过他的
movements
力量，
through
他
life.
控制着他们生命
So
中的
are
所有
we
的
really
行动。
free to choose
所以我们
God
真的
or
可以
not?
自由选择上帝吗？
If he controls everything,
如果
are
他
we
控
really
制一
making a
切，
choice?
那我们真的在做选择吗？
Who's been to the fairground?
谁去
Anybody
过
been to a fairground before? You go into like one of these
谁去
nice
过游
roller
乐场？
coasters.
你们去坐过
So
过
you
山车吗？
pay for the ticket, you get in the
你
roller
付了
coaster,
钱，拿了
you're
票
strapped，in,
你坐上过山
and
车
then，
你被绑在里面，
the roller coaster's going up and up and
然后
up.
过山车
And
一直
then
在上
maybe as
升
you're，going up, you think, uh-oh, no,
然后
I
当
want
你
to get
上
off.
往上升的时候，你想哦
It's
不
too
不，我
high,
想
I
下
want to
车
get
了
off.，
太
You
高
can't get
了，
off.
我想下去，你下不
You're
去了
stuck, you're there.
你被困住了，
And you're going to have to go through that ride, whether you
你
like it or
将不得
not.
不经历这一段旅程，不
It
管你
doesn't
喜
matter
欢
if
与
you
否，
like the ups and
不
downs,
管
it's
你
going to
喜
go
欢
all
起起
over
落
where
落
it's
并
got
不
to
重
go.
要，它
And
会
it's going to
到头
finish
会
where
这
it
样
has，to finish.
它必须要去它该去的地方。
The fact is that you've sat in it,
事实上，你已经
it's
坐在里
done. You
面
don't
了，
have a choice in the matter.
你并没有选择了。
And it's a bit like that. Once the soul enters into the
一
body,
旦灵魂
you're
进入
along for
身
the
体，
ride.
你就渴求这个旅程，
Everything that the body and the mind can experience, you're going to
身体和
experience
心理
it.
所能经历的，
Sadness
你都想去经历它。悲伤、
Happiness, all the
幸福
full range of
所有这
emotions,
些
hunger,
情
pain,
绪、
pleasure,
饥饿、痛苦、快乐，
and everything that you can experience with the mind and the
以
body.
及你用心灵和
You
身
have
体
it.
所能体验到的一切，你都会拥有它。
Of course, are we truly in control of the body?
当然，我们真正的能控制身体吗？
The body will take care of itself
身体会照顾自
until
己
it，doesn't. There comes a time for us to be
直到它不能
born, a
再照
time
顾
for
自
us
己。
to die, according to the
有
law
时
of
间
karma, one of the laws of nature.
根据业力法则，我们有生有死的时刻。
There are a lot of people that believe that
有很
God
多人
is in
相信
control of life
上帝
and in
掌控
control
着
of
生命
everything.，
控制着一切。
I've heard many devotees actually say,
我听
yeah,
到过
it's
很多奉行
Guruji's
者说
lila.，
是
It's
这
all
是咕
Guruji's
噜基的
doing.
力了，都是咕噜基的。
But how do you really know?
但
This is
你
the
怎么知
question.
道
How
呢
do？you really know that Guruji is really doing all of it?
你怎么知道咕噜基在做的这一切呢？
Have you come to that point where you can perceive the divine in everything,
你
and you know
曾
if
经
Guruji has done it or he hasn't done
有
it?
到过那种状
If he's
态，
fully
能够
responsible
感
and
受
that
到
person
神在
has
做一切
0%
吗？
responsibility?
你能够
Can you
感受
perceive
到
that?
咕噜基在做一切，咕噜基在负责一
That's
切，
the point
那
here
个人没有任何
is
责
that
任，
we
你
don't
真的能
perceive
这样
the
感受到
will
吗？
of God.
这就是问题所在。
If we
问题是我
perceive the
们
will of
不
God,
太能
then for
感
sure
受
we'd know
到
if we really truly
神
have
的
free
意
will
志。
or not.
如
And if
果
we
我
have free
们
will,
真的
how
能感受
free
到的话，我们就知道
is
我们有
free?
没有自由意志。如果我们真的有
How long
自由
is
意志
that
的话，
rope?
那多自由才是自由呢？
And every
那
moment
条
it's
绳到底有
changing.
多长？每一个时刻它还在不停的变化。
Shall I catch the earlier bus or the later bus?
我应该赶
When I
早
go
班
into
车
the shop,
还是赶晚班车？
what shall I buy?
当我去店铺的时候，我应该买什么东西？
You know, many years ago, when I was 6 years old, my mum asked me, the first question that I ever had to think was the first question that anybody asked me that I had to think. And she asked me, who has had the most impact in your life? Who's influenced you the most in your life? And I had to think. So I was 6 years old, and she was thinking I would say her, or my dad, or my teachers at school, or some of my friends. And I was thinking, and I said to her, me. She was like, what? What do you mean? I said, me. She said, why? And at that age, I couldn't really explain to her. But what I wanted to say is, I'm responsible for the way I perceive things. I'm responsible for how I relate to things, experiences, things that happen. I choose. I didn't have the faculty to explain to her in that way at that time. But I was very clear. I am the biggest influence in my life. And so in going back to this idea of free will, how free are we to perceive life? Now, it says like here in the verse, he controls all their movements through life as if they were seated on a machine. This is what Krishna is talking about. If God has complete control over everything, is there really such a thing as free will? If that was really true, you'd have no free will at all. Then if God says, well, I want you to have a relationship, it's not I want you, you have to. There's no choice. You have to love me. Guruji hasn't said that. So there is a certain responsibility that lies with us. In chapter 6, verse 26, Krishna says, wherever the fickle and unsteady mind wanders, one should bring it back under control, keeping it fixed on the self alone. So we have that right to act. We have the capacity to choose how we perform action. This is the point. We have the capacity to choose how we perform action. We have the capacity to choose how we respond. Whether it's conscious or unconscious, there is that choice there. We have that capacity. Sometimes we don't have the choice on what action we have to perform. How many of you go to work? How many of you have a job? Not many. A few, okay, very good. When you go to work, you have to do what you have to do, right? You have to do what the boss tells you, unless you're the boss. So when I had to work in London, I had to go into work, I had to do what my boss told me to do. And I had to do it within a certain time frame. I wasn't free to choose what I wanted to do. I was bound. I had to perform certain actions. And sometimes life is like that. Sometimes you only have a certain amount of time to perform an action. So for example, when you really want to go to the toilet, it will not wait till tomorrow. So you have to perform action within certain times, and sometimes you're not free to choose that. But how you respond to that action or actions from others is up to you. So in reality, is that our bodies are bound to automatically performing action. You don't have to think about breathing, do you? Happens automatically. You don't have to think about your heart beating. It beats by itself. When you eat your lovely vegetarian food, you don't have to tell your digestive system to start digesting. It's happening automatically. Your body's respiring automatically. It's doing so many functions, repairing itself. When you get sick, it helps to heal you. The body's doing so many things, but this is happening automatically. When you put your hand in the fire, automatically you'll pull your hand back out of the fire very quickly. It's an automated response. The Lord, who's centered within the heart of all beings, is taking care of all these automated processes that enable the body to live. We don't have to really do that much. We are along for the
我们
ride,
真的
like in the roller
不需
coaster.
要做太多，我们渴望着旅程，就像坐过山车一样。
So in chapter 6, verse 24, Krishna says, it should be done whilst renouncing all desire for material things and restraining the senses through the mind alone. So one thing about free will is that we can choose
所以
how
有
we
一件
use the
事
mind,
关于自由意志是
and how
我
we
们可
focus
以
the
去
mind,
选择如何
or
去
how we
用思想，
detach the mind
如
from
何去集
certain
中思
things.
想，或者如何
And as I
让
talked
自
earlier
己
on about
不依恋于某些
addictions,
事情。
we
正
can
如我之前
attach
谈
the
到
mind
的
into these things
成
or
瘾，
not.
我们可以将思想
I
附
must
加到
have,
这
I
些
want it, I need
事
it.
物上，或者
I need it tomorrow
不
and
这
the day
样做。
after.
我必须要有这些东西，或
Or
者
you can
明
train
天、
your
后天
mind
我
to
都要有它，
detach, to let
或者
go.
你可以训练你的头脑，
Have you
去
ever had that
放手。
experience when desire gets you into trouble?
你是否有过这种经历？当你的欲望
Wow,
让你陷
you're
入麻
very
烦。
spiritual yogis, all of you.
啊，
For
你们都
sure,
是非常有灵性的
I'm
瑜
sure
伽
many of
士。
you have been in trouble because of
肯定，
desire.
我相
You
信你
wanted
们
something
都
at some
因
point in
为
time.
欲望而陷入过麻烦。
Many years
你们
ago,
想要
when
在
I
某
was
个时
very
间范围
young,
内得到
I
某
had
些
the
东西。
desire to be a
多
Jedi.
年前，我很小的时候，
And
我渴望成为
I
一
lived my
名
dream,
武士。
not for very long.
我实现了我的
I
梦
was
想
about，
但不
6.
久，
And I was the
我那时
only kid in the school to have
我
a
在
Jedi
我
sword.
是学校里唯一
And
一
when you
个
press the button,
拥
it
有
glowed green
绝
because it
地
was
键
battery powered.
的孩子。当
But it was
你
as
按
good as
下
the real
按
thing
钮
for a
的时候，
6-year-old,
它会
right?
发出绿光，这
So of course,
是有电池
because I
的。
was the
对
only
于
Jedi
6岁的
in
孩
the
子来
area,
说，
I
这
had to
是
go on
非
lots
常
of
棒的，
missions.
因为
Jedis are
我
very
是
busy people
当地最
flying around the
绝无仅
universe,
有的武士，我必须执行很
killing
多
all the
任务，
baddies.
因为武士
So of
是
course,
非常
being a Jedi, I
繁
did
忙
have this
的。
desire to vanquish evil. And I had to
所以
vanquish the
我有欲
evil
望去杀死
Lord
那
Darth Vader,
些恶魔。
who just so happened to be my
我
4-year-old
要去
sister.
杀死恶魔大费的，她是我的4岁的
So
妹
when I
妹。
took my lightsaber
所以当
and
我
I
拿起
decided
我
to
的光
strike
剑，
down Darth Vader, my sister,
我决定
and
击
I
倒
brought
我
it
的妹
down
妹，
very heavily on her head,
并重
the,
重地
the,
打
the
在她的头
lightsaber
上。
hit and bent all the way over like
光
this,
剑
and then the light
击中
went off.
了她的头，
Lightsaber
并
destroyed,
变弯，
finished.
然后灯就灭掉了，
I was very angry
光
with my
剑被毁
sister.
了。
I was shouting at,
我
you
当
broke
时
my
对我的妹
lightsaber!
妹非常生气，
And I was
说
beating her
你
and
损
shouting
坏
at
了我
her.
的光剑。
And then I got into
我
trouble.
打
Then my
她，
mum was on
并
the
大喊
scene.
大叫，然后我就遇到麻烦，我的妈妈出
So
现。
desire can get you into trouble in so
所
many
以
ways, at all
欲望
stages of
可以
life.
让你
life after
在
life.
生命的各个阶段陷入不同的麻烦，
And
一
it's
生
very
有意
much
识的。
dependent on where you focus the
所以
mind.
在
It's all
很
about
大
how you use the
程度
mind.
上取决于你把你的思想集中在哪里，你如何去
Now
使用
Arjuna
你的
says
思
to
想。
Krishna, chapter 3, verses 36
阿
and
朱那对
37.
奎师那说，第
Well,
3
Arjuna
章
says to
36节和
Krishna,
第
what is it,
37节。
Krishna, that causes one to
Arjuna
stray
对
even
奎师
against
那说，
one's own will,
是什么导
as
致
if
一个人
compelled
甚
by
至
some
违
force?
背自己的
And
意
Krishna
愿？
answers him in
而
return,
你是就好
it is
像
the
被某
desire
种
born
力
of
量
the
强
guna
迫
of
一样。奎师
rajas
那回答他
and
说，
the resulting
这是
anger.
来自于三德的欲
That
望
is the all-devouring,
以及
sinful enemy of the world.
愤怒，这是吞噬一切的罪恶的
Desire
敌人。
gets us into so much trouble,
欲望
again
一
and
次
again and
又一
again.
次让我们陷入麻烦，
but it's the product of the material creation, actually.
但是
It's
但
not
它
part
是
of
物
who
质
we
创造的
truly
产
are.
物，
It's not part of our true identity.
它不是我们真正
So one of the
的身
qualities
份的
that
一部分。
govern this material creation,
所以
this
支配
universe,
这个物质
is the
创
three
造
gunas.
的
One of them is the guna
品
of
质之一
rajas.
是三
And
德，
this
其中是
gives rise
一
to
个
desire,
是
and it
惰性，
impacts
这就
every
能
single
够让
living
欲望
being.
升起，
It's
它
not just
会影
humans.
响着每一
It's
个
all
生
the
物，
animal kingdom,
不仅仅
the
是人
insect
类，
kingdom,
而是所有的
also
动
plant
物
kingdom.、
昆虫，
It impacts
植物
every
等等，
living thing.
它影响每一
So
个
nobody's
生
free
物，
of that.
所以没有人是
So
能
they're
够
all
逃脱这个
compelled
束缚的
to act
影
according to
响
their
的，所
desires.
以所有人他们都
So
被
again, the
欲
question
望
comes,
驱使。
do we
所
really
以
have
问
free
题又
will?
来了，
Are we really free to
我们真的
choose?
有自由意志
to
吗？
align with
我
God
们真
or
的
not?
自由的能做去
Are
选
we going
择
to be
吗？
compelled,
去
pushed by
选择与
desire?
上帝结盟或者不结盟，或者我们是
How
被
many
欲望所
times
驱使呢？
do
多
each
少
of you
次
act in a day
你们每个人的行
without
动，在每一
being
天当
compelled
中
by
是
desire?
不是被欲望
Just
驱
think
使
about
的？
it for a second.
想一想，
How many times do you act without being
你有
influenced
多
by
少次的
desire?
行动是不受欲望
It's a very
驱
subtle
使的？
thing. You might be lying in your bed and
这
like,
是一个
oh
非
yeah, it
常
doesn't
微
feel
妙的
comfortable.
事
Just
情。你可能躺在
move
床
over
上
like
想
that.
着，我不太舒服，我就调整一下。
Well,
你是这样
desire
子的
for
吗？
comfort. it's arising. Even when you're in a very perhaps unconscious state, it's still
即
there.
便你
It's still
可能是在
influencing
一种
you.
非常无意识的状
It's
态，
a
它
very
仍然
subtle
在
thing.
那里影响着你，非常的微妙。
Guruji gave a lovely satsang in relation to this topic of free will
给了
and
一个
will.
非常美妙的 satsang
So the
关
question was,
于
Guruji,
自由意志
can we
和
really
意
change
志。
at will,
所以
or
问题
only
是
when the
咕噜
moment
鸡，我们
allows
真
us?
的可以改
How
变
to
我们的
really
意
change
志，
whatever,
或者是
whenever is necessary?
只有那一时刻
Guruji said,
允许
"Wow,
我
that
们
would
说
be
我们才会
amazing.
改变。咕噜鸡
The
说，
changing at
那
will
如
is
果是
like
那样的话，
asking
就
you
会
you
很
don't
好
like
了。
something,
改
start liking
变
it.
意志就像是让你
There's
去
a-
喜欢一个你不喜欢的事情。
There's a product in England called Marmite,
英
and
国
it's
有
a
一个
product
产
either you love
品
it
叫
or you
妈
hate
买，
it. There's
这
nowhere
种
in
产品
between.
是你要么喜欢它，要么
I
讨
don't know
厌
if you
它，
have
没有
something
中
like that
间
in
的
your
去
countries. Some
空
people
间。
love it, some
我
people
不知
hate
道
it.
你的国家有没有这种东西，有些人很喜
It's
欢它，有些人
disgusting.
很
Don't
讨
ever
厌
have
它。
it, by the way.
这个产品不
So
太好。
Guruji said
顺
last
便
week
说一
somebody
句。
asked me the similar question. You
所以
see,
咕噜鸡上就
meaning
说，
to change
有
at
人
will
问
means that
我
we
过
have a
类似的
free
问
will.
题，你以
You
为
have a
可以改
certain
变意志，代
freedom
表着
upon
你有自由
something.
意志，
We can change
你
at
有
will.
一定的
Can we
自
do
由，
that?
你
No.
可以改变
If
自
you don't
由。
like
我们
something,
真
I
的能
ask
做
you
这
to
样做
start
吗？
liking
不
the，thing.
如
It has to
果
be
你不喜
instant.
欢一个事情，我让你去喜欢它，它
That
必须
means
是立即马
at
上
will.
的。这意味
It's
着，
not that it takes a month to change.
为
That is willingness to
如
change.
果它需要花一定的
If
时
we
间，这
want
是
to
你改
transform
变的意愿
ourselves, if
如
we
果我
want to
们想
change
要
something in our
改变我们
life,
自己，
we
如
have
果我
to
们想要改
have
变
a
我们生活中
willingness
的
to
事情，
transform our
我
life.
们必须要有一个
So
改变的
free
意
will,
愿。
willingness, I want to change.
所以
Let's put
自
that
由
into
意
action.
志
Let's take certain steps.
意愿
Let's take
让
some
我们
months
去
or
行
years or
动，
decades to
让我
get
们
there.
采取一些措
That's
施，
will.
花一些时间去实现这个目标，这是一个意愿。
It's always about ourselves, our ego, which we can't perceive.
这永远都是关于我们自己，我们的小我，我们无法去
Us
感
humans,
知。
because we're so attached to our ideas of things that we
作为人类，因为我
actually
们
we
如
very
此执着
often
于
have
对事物的
ideas.
想法，
We
实
picture
际
it
上我
very
们经
important,
常有一
very
些想
great.
法，我们想象它
He
非
said
常重要，
Bhagavan
非
has
常
this
的伟大。
power to change
他
things
说，国家凡
instantly at
有
will.
这种能力
He says
去立
humans don't have
马
that
改变
capacity.
事情，根据他的意愿，人类没有这种能力。
The willingness to change, that's why it takes time.
意
Because you
愿
are
改变，这
aware
就是
of certain
为什么需要
idea
时间，
about
因为
it.
你有意识
Some things are wrong inside
到
of me.
他
There's
的
something I need to
想法，有
change.
些在我内在的东西，
I
我
need
需
to
要去
change my
改变，
ideas of things. I have to change myself.
我
But
需
that
要
takes
改变
time
我的
because
想
you are
法
so。accustomed to a
但这
certain
需
way
要
of
时间，
thinking, a
因
certain
为
way of
你如
being,
此习惯于某种思考的方式，某
a
种
certain way
存
of
在的
seeing
方式，
things. So that's why to change
某
like
种
that, it
看待
is
事物的方
impossible.
式。所以就
Because
是
you
为什
don't just
么
change like
你
this.
想要
All of
改
your
变
natural tendencies, your
是不可
habits,
能
your
的，你
unconscious
不
habits.
可能一下就立马改变了你所有的习惯，
But you have
你
the
无意
choice,
识
you
的习
see.
惯。
Whenever there is a situation that you're
但
in,
你
you
确
always
实
have
有
the choice to take
选
it
择，
positive
无论
or
你
take it
在什么样
negative.
的状况，你都
That
总
choice
是
is
可以
yours.
选择
It's
积
different
极或
from
者消
will.
极的看待它。这个选择是你的，
So
这
we're
意
separating
愿
out
是不
these
同的
things, choice and will.
所以我们再
The
把这
will,
个选
that
择
can
和意
change
愿
just
分
like
开。
this, from one
意
second to the
愿
other.
可以改
Some
变，
people
从一秒
can.
到
Some
另一
people
秒
can
改
literally
变。
turn the
有
page
些人可以，
completely.
有些人
Sometimes you
可
meet
以
people
完
in
全
life for a
的
very long
翻
time,
篇。有
and
些
all of a
人在
sudden,
你的生活中你认识很
they
长时
don't want
间，
to
突然
speak to you. They don't want to know
他
you.
们不想和你说话，他们不
Guruji
想
said it
认
doesn't
识
just
你。
happen like that overnight
古鲁就说过，
or
这
from
并
one
不是
second to
一
the
夜
other.
之间发生的，
They have a certain
或
thought
者是
in
一
their
秒到
mind.
另一秒的事情。
Then they're
他
reflecting on
们在
it.
脑子里有某种想法，
And then all of a
他
sudden they
们
say,
会反思，
you know,
然后
they,
突然他
how do
们
you
说
say,
不
they，ghost you, they drop you.
他们驱赶你，他们把你
It
扔掉。
hasn't happened from one second to the other. It might look like that, but actually
这
they
并不
fashioned
是
it in their
一
mind
秒钟
already
的
over
事
some
情，
time.
而是他们在头脑中不停的思考。
So when we hold upon these
反思
ideas,
过的
then
事
we
情。
can either grow or we
所以
can
当我们
fall.
坚持这些想
But
法
at
时，
will, we
我们
can't
要么
change.
成长，要
We can
么
have the
堕落
willingness to，
但我们
transform,
不能随
the
意改
willingness
变。
to
我们可以
change,
有
and
改变的意
it
愿，
takes its time.
但
So
这需要
even
时
if you
间。
were to have free will,
所以，即使你有
Guruji's
自由的
outlined
意
very
志，
clearly that will, it takes
歌
time.
勒基说的非常
If
清
you
楚
want to，change,
那个
it's
意
going to
愿是
take some
需要
time to
花时间
transform.
的。如果你想改变，需要花一定的时间去改变。
Now, I wanted to look at this definition of free will and fate,
现在我们来看一下
because
自由意志与
this
命
comes
运
in
的
very
定
much
义，
to this idea of aligning to the will of God.
因为这与神的意志达成一致很相似。
Free will is the power of acting without the
自由意志
constraint of necessity or
是
fate,
不受
the ability to act at
束
one's
缚
own
的
discretion.
行动的力量，
Okay,
自
so
行
let's
决定
look
行
at
动的力量。
this definition
所以让我
of
们看
free
看
will. And then the second one's the definition of fate. So these two.
第二个是命运的定义，这两
To
个。
act without constraint means to make decisions freely, without being restricted by external factors, without limitations, without rules.
不受外部的因素的限制。
Say, for example, I'm free to choose what I want to eat.
我可以自由的选择
So
我
I go
想
into
吃
the
的东西。
supermarket. Maybe I'm
我们去超市。
diabetic, so I can't choose the products which have
可能我
sugar
有
in.
糖尿病，可能
Maybe I've only got
我
€1.25
所以我不能
in
选
my
择
pocket.
含糖的产品。
Maybe I'm
可能
allergic to
口袋
dairy.
里只有25块，也
So
许
I'm
你
not
对
free
乳
to
制品
choose
过敏，
whatever I want
所以我
because
不
there
能
are
自由
certain
的选择
restrictions.
我想要的东西，因为有一些
So
限
to
制。
act not out of necessity means there are no factors
所以
which constrict you in making that
采取行动不
process
所以
of
这意味着有一
choice,
些
of
因素是
deciding.
在限制着你，在你做选择的过程当中。
Now, the thoughts which arise, the desires which arise inside of you, are not actually
那
a
些
product
产
of
生
who
的
you
想法，
are.
你内在的想法，
As I
并
said
不是
before,
你的产物，并不是你。
desires
正如
arise
我
as
之
a
前所
result of
说，
Rajasguna. It's
欲
part of
望
the
是
material
因为
creation.
三德，
It's not part of your soul.
是创造的一部分，不
But
是你灵魂
because we
的一部
identify
分。
with these desires, these thoughts,
但因为我们
we're always
认同这
influenced
些
by
愿
them.
望，
So are
我
we
们总
really
是受他们
making
的
a
影响。
free choice?
所以我们真的在做自由的
Because
选
there's
择
always a
吗？
subtle influence there.
因为
And
总
if you
是
was to
有一
think,
些
yes,
微妙
I'd
的
like to
影响。
align with the will of
如果
God,
你认为是的，
well,
我
there are the
很
other
想与神的
factors
意志保持一
inside of
致，
you that are
但
constantly
也有
acting
其他
upon the
的影
mind,
响因素，
causing you
不
to either make a
停的
choice
影响着你
towards
的思
this
想，
or for
导
that.
致你要么做出这样的选择或那样的选择。
So just to talk a little bit more about the gunas, Krishna says in chapter 3, verse 27, all actions are being performed in every way by the gunas within material nature. One whose mind is deluded by the sense of individuality thinks, I am the doer.
被欺骗的人
So
认
this
为
is
我是
interesting
行
here.
动
He
者。
says, one whose mind is
所以
deluded
这里很有趣，
by
他
the
说
sense of
一个
individuality
心智
thinks, I am the doer.
被迷惑的人
So
认为
because
我
they're
自己
stuck in
是
that
行
sense
动
of
者，
I,
因
me, and
为
mine,
他们被困在那种
that personality that
我
has an identity,
我的那种感觉，那种小我的
doing all the
个人
actions.
身份。
But Krishna is saying this is not
正
true.
如
It's these three
奎师那
gunas
说
that are
说到这不
performing
是真
all of the
的，
actions
这里有
in
三
nature,
德
in truth.
在自然界中执行影响着一切
So
的
how am I
行动。
free to act, free to choose,
所以那
if it's really
我有
the
多自由的
gunas
去
that are
行动呢？
performing all actions?
是真的这三
This is
德
the，question.
还是我自己在做自由的选择？这就是
Because
问
the
题。
three gunas are impulsing everything,
因为
desire.
三德正推动着
All
一
creatures are
切
impulsed by
欲
desire.
望，
Each
所有的
person
生
is
物都受到欲望的
influenced by
影
one of
响，
these three, to a lesser
每个
or
人都
greater
受
amount.
到这
One
三
of the two.
德的影响，或
All
多
your
或少。
decisions are influenced by these three gunas.
你
Krishna
的
maps this
决
out in
定
the
都受
Gita
这
a
三德的
lot.
影响。可是那在不
He
在梵
talks
歌
about
中
the
很
influence
多
of
次
the
的
three
提到
gunas
这一
and
点。
how they influence you.
他谈到了这三
So how
德如何影响你，
free are we to
所
really
以
make choices?
我们有多自由呢？
How
在做
long
选
is
择
that
上，
rope that binds us
这条
to
绳有
being
多长？
bound to choose certain options, to go certain routes in life? Well, what about fate? It says here from the
那么
Oxford
命运呢？
Language Dictionary, fate is the development
维
of
京语言
events
词典中
outside a
说，
person's
命
control,
运是一
regarded
个
as
人无法控制
predetermined
的
by a
事情的发
supernatural
展，
power.
被认为是由超自然力量预先决定的。
So let's see, are we able to act not out of fate?
那么，让我们看看我们是否能够
Is there a
不出于
supernatural
命运
power
而采取行动
that is
呢？
responsible for the
是否
experience
有
in
一种
life, that
超自
guides
然
you
的
in
力
life,
量
that will bring you everywhere you
负
need
责
to
着
go
生命中
to
的
meet
经历，
whoever
引
you
导
need
着
to
你的生
meet,
活，带你
to
去
experience what you
任
need
何
to
你该去
experience?
的
Is
地
there a
方，
power that's
去遇见
in
你
control of this?
遇见的人和去
Krishna
体验
says in
你
chapter 9,
该做
verse
的
10,
体验。有
it's
人
because
在
of
控
me
制这个
alone
一切吗？
that this
可是那在
prakriti
第9章第
produces
10
all the
节中
moving
说，这
and
是因为
non-moving
我
beings.
这个原质
It
才
works
产
under
生
my
了
direction, hence the world
移
exists
动
the way
或
it
者不移
does.
动的存在，因此这个世
Well, it
界以
seems
这
to
种方式存
say
在。
here that there is a supernatural power.
这里似乎
Chapter 9, verse
是
10,
就是在说，
there
这
is
里
a
确实是
supernatural
有
power
超自然的力量。第9
that
章
is
第
in
10节中
control
说
of，everything.
这里是有超自
All
然的力
things
量，它
moving
控
and
制着一
non-moving.
切。所有
Can
的
you
东
think of
西，
anything
不
that's
管是移动还
either
是
not
静止的，
moving
你能
or
想到
moving?
那种要么是在动，或者是没有在动的东西吗？
The stars move, the planets move,
星
we
星在
move,
动，
the earth moves.
行星在动，我们在动，地球在动。
Even if you think that you're, standing still on the earth and you're not moving, the earth is moving
即便你
very,
认
very
为
fast.
你在地球上没有动，
You're
这个
actually
地球仍
moving.
然在动，非常快。
Krishna says,
可是那说，
this Prakriti produces all the moving and non-moving beings. It works under my direction. Everything moving and non-moving
这
works
个
under
在
his
我的指
direction.
导下控制运动或
So
者不运动的
whether you
都
like
在
to
我
call
的
it
指导下
Prakriti
行
or
动。
nature,
所以你不管你
nature
愿
is
意
the
称
force
它为
which
原
runs
质或
this
者是自
universe.
然，
There are so many
自
laws
然是
within
运行这
nature
个宇宙的力量，
that govern how
自然
nature
中有
works.
很多法则，
The
控
three
制着
gunas,
自然如
as
何去
Krishna
运
says,
作。
gives
三
a
德正
description
如
of
和
how
尚
they
那所说，
impact us, impact all of our
描述了
emotions,
他们如何
impact what
影
we
响
like
着
to
我
eat,
们，我们的情绪，
impact what we're
我
interested
们吃
in,
的东西，我们
impacted
的
what kind of pleasure we gravitate towards in life.
我们对什么感兴趣，以及影响着我们对什
So
么
Krishna says
比较能够享
in
乐。
chapter 18, verse
所以
59,
可是那在第18章
if you
中
give
说
into pride
第
and think,
59
I will
节
not fight, your
如
resolve
果
will
你
be
屈服于傲
futile.
慢，
From
并
your own
认为我
nature,
不会反抗，
you will be
你的
compelled
决
to
心将
act.
是徒劳的。从你自己的本性来看，你将
So the
被迫
problem
采
here
取行
is
动
that。Krishna is trying to highlight to Arjuna,
所以这里的问题是，奎什
and
纳
not
尝
only
试
Arjuna, to
对
all
阿朱那
humanity,
强调说，
if we operate from
不仅
pride,
是阿
from
朱
that
那，是对
egoic
所有人类。
sense of
如
identity,
果我们
then automatically our nature,
从小我的傲
which
慢
is
中
our
行动，
karma, our
那么自然
samskaras,
的，我们的
whichever
业
of
力，
the
我
three
们的
gunas
本
we're
性，
most influenced by,
无论我们受
Our
哪一种
habits
三德的影响，我们的习
all of
惯，
these things and many, many other factors will
所有这些事
automatically
情
lead
和
us
其他的
to a
因素
certain outcome
都将
if we're
自动
identified with
影
this
响我
egoic
们去做
sense
出
of
某种
identity.
结果。如果我们认同这种小我
So
的
we can
话，
also call that fate, because all of this
就我们
is
也
under
可
the
以称
power
之
of the
为
Supreme
命运，
Lord.
因为所有这一切都
Even if
在
we do not
至
want
尊
to
主
act in
的
a certain
力量之
way,
下。
we would do what our
即便
mind
我们不
perceives that
想
we
以
should
某
do,
种方式行动，
which would lead us to our own doom. So it's very hard for a
这就是我
person
们
to
自己的
see
命运。
what outcome is
所以
actually
一个
fate
人
in
很
life,
难看出
because there are so many
什么结
factors.
果实际上是命
But a
运，
person
因为
doesn't
有很
normally
多因
perceive
素
the。divine in everything.
但一个人
Like I said
通常
before,
不会在所有
Some
一
people
切
say,
事物
yeah,
当中
it's all
去
Guruji's
感知到
leela.
神。
Yeah, it's
比如
him
说有
doing
些人
everything.
说，哦，这一
Is
切
it
都
really
是
the
古鲁
case?
吉
Can
的
you
力
really
量，
see
都
the
是他在
divine
做。
acting in
是
everything?
真的这样吗？你
If
真
you
的
could,
能在一切
then
的
you
事
would
物
be
中
very
感受到
clear
神吗？
exactly what is
如果
fate.
你可以的话，你就会非常的清楚他的什么是命运。
I'm only aware of one person that has that capacity to see the divine in everything, and that's Guruji. To perceive the actual
有些
will
人
of
是
God.
有这个能力去在一切当中看到神，这
Many
个人
years
就是
ago,
古鲁吉，他能够
Guruji
在一切当中感
shocked
知
me a
到
little bit.
神的意志。很多年
He
前
said, you know,
古鲁吉
in the
让
history
我
of
震惊了
humanity,
一些。他说：“你知道，
there have
在人类历史
only
上
been 3 people that have evolved
只有3个人
spiritually faster
的
than
灵
what
性
they
进
should have
展
done,
超过了他们应该的速度，
according to the will of God. And I went,
依照神的意志。
I'm like, what?
然后我就
And I was thinking, wait a minute. He said, in the
So,
history of
什么？
humanity.
他说，
So that's
在
all
人类历史
humans
上，
up till now.
所以这就是
And now for all those
至今所有
humans,
的人类。
there's a lot. Now we've got, what,
对于
8
所有
billion,
的这
isn't
些
it, on the
人，从
planet?
很多人，现在我
And
们
that's
有
just
80
now,
亿，
but
对
in
吗？
previous cycles of time on the earth,
而现在那只是
Mother
现
Earth
在
press the reset
还包
button,
括
you
地
have a
球
pole
以前
shift,
的
it gets washed
地
clean,
球母亲不停的重启。
continents go up and down. But we've had other civilizations of humanity. So
地板
we've had
地
a
块
lot of
运动
humans
等等，
on
我们还有
Earth
其他的
over
人类文明。
billions of years.
所以这么多年，我们有很多11
And he
年
says
来
in
有
the
很
history
多
of
人类。
humanity, there's only ever been
然后
3
他说，在人类
people
历史
that
上
have
只有
evolved
3个人
faster
的
than
灵性
what
进
God had
展超过
planned
了
according
神
to
给
the
他们
human
的
evolution.
计划。
And I looked at him and I
然后我
thought,
看着他，我想，
wait a minute, you know the evolutionary plan for
等一下。
every single human being,
你知
and you know
道
those 3
每一
exceptions.
个人的进化
And I just thought,
进
who
展，
are you?
并且你知
Who
道
are
这
you?
3个例
I
外，
have no
你到底
clue
是
who
谁
you？are.
我完全不知道你是谁。
Sometimes he just, Guruji, what he does is he
he
takes the
有时候
mask
做个
and he
事
just
情，
pulls it back a little bit and goes,
他揭
hello.
开一点点面具，
Puts
说
it back.
“hello”，
Just gives you a
然后
little
把面具
glimpse
拉回去，
of
他
who
只
he
是
is.
让你一瞥，让你了解他是谁。
So Krishna says in chapter 7, verse 7,
所以，可是那在第7章第7节中说
sorry translators,
对不起，
They're trying their best to keep up with me. Chapter 7, verse 7, he says, There is nothing higher than me, O Arjuna. All of this rests upon me like pearls on a thread.
都在我身上，就像珍珠在我身上线上一样。
So he seems to indicate that everything in life
所以
rests
他似
upon
乎
him.
在表明生命中的一切都依赖着他。
Stars, the moon, the planets, the
一
solar
切
system,
星星、月亮、行星、太阳系、
the earth, everything in the
地
earth
球、
rests upon
地
him.
球上的一
He
切
holds everything
都
in
依靠着
place.
他，他把一切都
If that's the
放
case,
在
then there
该
is a supernatural power
该在的位置。如果是这样的话，
that
那
is
么
in
就有一种
control
超自然的
and
力
holding
量
everything.
在控制着一
Then
切
for。sure,
那么
there is a
肯定
fate,
有一个命运，有命运的
there，is a plan, there is a
有一个
destiny,
计划，
there is fate.
有一个命运。
Absolutely. Then how limited are we to make decisions? This is the
那么
question.
我们在做决定上
Are
到
we
底
just
有
free? We
多
can
受
just
限
jump in
呢？
like that to
还
align
是
to
说
the
我们
will of
就是
God?
自由的，我们可以就这
Or are
样
we
跳
going to
进
be
去，上
destined
神的上
to
意
play in
识
the
符
material
合，
realm
或
and
者我
enjoy
们可
another
以在
life,
物质
another life, another
领
life
域玩耍，享受一世又一世的人生，
without that relationship with the divine?
而不与神有关系。
Guruji tweeted recently,
古鲁吉
Watch
最近
your
在推特上
thoughts,
说
they，become words.
观察你的
Watch your
想法，
words,
它
they
们变成
become
文字；
actions.
观察你的
Watch your actions, they become habits.
文字，它们变成
Watch
行
your
动；
habits,
看你的
they
行动
become
变成
character.
习惯；注意你
Watch your
的习惯，
character,
它们变成
it
性格；
becomes your
注意你的
destiny.
性格，它变成你的命运。
It starts with watching your thoughts,
这就是从你观
Do we
察你
believe in
的
our thoughts?
想法开始。
or not?
我们相信我们的想法吗？
It's a very important question.
这是一个非常重
Who
要
would
的
I
问题。
be without that thought?
如果我没有这个想法，
It's a
我是
question
谁？
that's used in therapy. Some
这是
people have
在
a
治疗
thought
中常用的
that
问
they're
题。
not loved.
有些人
When they
会
believe
认
it
为
to
他
be
们不
true,
被爱，
it produces certain
但他们相信
emotions,
的时候，
certain responses.
就会
He
产
doesn't
生某
love
些
me.
情绪。他不爱
She
我，
doesn't listen.
他不听。
It's not fair. Who would you
这
be
不公
without
平。
that thought?
如果你没有这些想法，你是谁
We all
呢？
have our thoughts. We have our
我们都有
how
自
do
己
you
的
say?
想法，我们有我们
our
的
video playing in the background.
我们的
We
视
have
频
certain
在
kinds
后
of
台播
thoughts.
放，我们有特定的
What's your
想法。
thoughts? Are they
观察你
really
的
true?
想法，他们是真的。
We can
是真
choose
实
how
的
we
吗？
experience life
我们
circumstances.
可以选择如何去体验
Even though
生
we're
活，
influenced constantly by
即便
many
我们不
factors,
断
the
的受
gunas,
到
samskaras.
许多因素的影响，三德等等，业力等。
Actually, I had a choice to
事
see
实
whether
上
I did this lecture. I was
我可以
asked,
选择我要不
would
要
you
做
like
这
to
个
do
讲
this
座。
lecture? And I
我被
said,
问到
no.
你想做这个讲座吗？我说不，
I said, no. Well, I'll do the lecture, but I won't do this one.
我说我可以做
I
这个
don't
讲
like
座，
the
但是
topic
我不想
aligning
做
to
这
the
一
will of
个，
God. I'll
我
pick
不喜
another
欢这
topic.
个主题，
So
我
I
选
picked
另外
another
一个主
topic.
题，所以我选了另外一个主题。
And I said to the academy, can I do this one? And they said,
我
no.
对学员说，我可以做这个吗？他们说不，
So I said, okay, then I guess I'll do aligning to the will
所
of
以我
God.
说好吧，那我
I guess
就
it was
按照
God's
神
will
的意
that
志
I
行
have to
事
do
吧
this。lecture.
我想这是神的意志。
Maybe God was like,
来做
okay,
这个
this
讲
is
座。
Swami needs to align to the will of
或是
God.
上帝说，
Needs
这
to
个
listen a
swami
little
应
bit
该
better.
与神的意志行事，需
So
要
it can
更
be
倾听。
difficult to align to the
所
will
以
of
可
God
能
because we don't know
有
what
些
it
时
is.
候与神的意志保持一致不太容易，因为我们不知道神的意志是什么。
In knowing what God wants, we have to cultivate
知道
firstly
神
that right
想要什么，我们首
thoughts
先必须要
that we have in our
培养
mind.
自己的正确的
Then
头
from
脑，
right thought comes right speech
然
and
后
right
从
action.
正确的头脑
But it
中，
starts
我
with
们
the
才
mind.
能有正确的语
And
言和
only
行
through
动，但它始于
consistent
思想。
practice,
只有通过持续不
focus
断的
with the
练
mind
习，我们的注
can
意
we
力
actually
集中
align
在我们的
ourselves
头
to
脑
what God
上，
wants.
我们才能
Might
真正
take
使自
many
己与上帝
days,
的意
weeks,
保持一
months,
致，可
years,
能需要
can
很多
take many
天、
lives
很
to
多
align
很
with
多周，
God,
可
with
能有
what
很
God
多
wants.
事，我们才能知道神的意志。
So the question arises, well, what happens
所以问题就出现
if I
了：
do not listen,
如果
if I do
我
not
不听，
choose what God wants
如
for
果我
me?
不选择
What then?
去做神给我的选择，给我的要求，
Did you ever have that
然后呢？
thought? Well, what happens
你有
if
过
I
那
don't do
种
what
想，
Guruji
你
tells
想
me?
过，我如果不去做咕噜鸡告诉我的话，会发生什么呢？
So this kind of a question was obviously in Arjuna's mind.
所以这个问题当然在
Krishna
阿
says
朱
to
纳的心中
Arjuna,。Machita
Krishna 对 Arjuna 说
sarvadurgani maprasadat tarishyasi atachidvam ahankaran nashoyasi vinakshasi. Focusing your mind on me by my grace, you shall overcome all
专
obstacles.
注你的头脑在我身上，通过我的恩
Here we
典，你
go.
会
If,
战胜所有的困难。
however,
如
out of
果
pride,
你
you do
因
not
为
listen to me,
傲慢
you will
不
be
听从于
ruined.
我， 你就会被毁灭。
Guruji shared not so long ago, it was nice, he
之前
said,
咕噜基分
even
享
when you are
了，
not in tune with
他
his
说
will, you will
即便
find
你与他的意
fault
志不一
with
致，
everything.
你也会抱怨一切。
Even when you are
挑剔
not in
一切。
tune with his will, you will find fault with everything. Ever known anybody like that? It doesn't matter
你
what
认识这样
happens
的
in
人
their
吗？
life. They
无
always
论生活中
complain.
发生什么，
Nag,
他们
nag,
总是
nag,
会
nag.
抱
No,
怨。
no, 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 no. Everything's bad. Even if
一
they
切
have
都
a good
是糟糕
experience,
的。
it's still bad.
即便他们有好的经历，仍然是
He
很
says,
糟
if you
糕
are
的。
in tune with him, you will be guided in
他说，
life.
如果你
If you are
与
aligned
他
with the
保
will
持
of
一
God,
致，你就会被指
you will
引。
be
如
happy
果
with
你是
life
与神的
and
意
accept
志，
whatever comes. You
如
will
果
live in
你
that state of
与神保
surrender,
持一致，受他的
happy
指
with
引，你就会
whatever
对生
comes.
活保持开心，你会臣服，对发生的一切感到快乐。
So in this verse, Krishna is emphasizing the
所以
importance
这一
of
节经文
humility
中，
and
可是
surrendering
呢
to divine will.
强调了
He is
谦
cautioning
卑
Arjuna, not
以及
just
去
Arjuna, actually
臣
all
服
of
于神的意
humanity,
志。
everybody,
他警告阿朱那，
against
不仅是
letting
阿朱
pride
那，
or
事实
ego
上是所有
dictate
人，
our thoughts
不
and
要让
actions.
傲慢或小我
If
来让
Arjuna
来控
refuses
制
to
我们。
heed
如果阿朱
Krishna's
那不听的话，
words
不听奎师那的话的
in
话，
his guidance, and out of
他
arrogance,
的指引
he risks
并且
facing
出
very
于
negative
傲慢，
consequences,
他就可能在精神和战
spiritually,
场上
but
面临
also on the
非常糟
battlefield.
糕的结果，就灵性和
And so
战
it's
场。
very important to set aside one's
因
ego
此，
and really
把
to
小我放
look
开，
at what is being asked of the divine
并
for us
观
in our
察
lives.
神真的向我们的指引。
So not only Krishna, but many God
所以
realized
不仅是
masters
奎师
come.
那，而
Many
是很
saints
多神
come
性
with the
了无
same
大师，
message
他
again
们
and
来
again
到
and again.
带着同样的信息，一
Guruji's
次
had
又一次来到
127
来这里。
incarnations on this planet.
咕噜基有127个化身在
Many
这
of
个地
those he
球上，
comes again and again
很多人
many
一次又一次的
saints
来，
to
很多圣人
remind.
来提醒。
And so God is very patient.
所以
Guruji's been
神
waiting
非
a
常
long
有
time
耐心，
to
咕
have
噜基等了很
relationships.
长一段时间来建立这
But
份
he will
关
only
系，
remind.
但他只会提醒。
So Krishna says about people who are ruled
所以
by the
Krishna
egoic nature. He
说
says
那些
in
被
chapter
小我统治的人、
16,
控
verse
制的
4,
人，他在第16章第10节中说，
hypocrisy, pride, anger,
虚伪、
rudeness
傲
and
慢、
ignorance, O Arjuna, belong to one who
愤怒、无
possesses a
知，
demonic nature.
这些都是属于
And he says
恶魔
in the
的
same
本
chapter,
性。
verse 10 and 16,
他在同一章第
filled
10
with
节和
insatiable
第16节
desires
中
due to
说，
delusion, they stubbornly hold to false ideas.
因为被
They
迷
act
惑，
with
被这
insincere
些错误的
intentions
想
based
法
on
控
deceit,
制，
pride, and passion.
他们基于欺
Bewildered
骗不
by
真
so
的
many
意图行事，
fantasies,
被
caught by the net
如
of
此多的
delusion,
幻想所迷
and
惑，
addicted to sensual enjoyments, they
制
fall down into hell.
并沉迷
So
于感官
this
享
is
受，他们
what
会
I
坠入地
read
狱。
earlier.
所以这是我之前读到
It
的，
gives a very vivid statement of what can happen
这非
when we
常
choose
生
to
动的
focus
说
the
明了，
mind
如果我们将
into the
思想
material creation.
集中在物质创造上的事，会发生什么？
He goes on to say in verses
他在第
19, 20, and
19
21
节、
of chapter
20、
16.
21节中
These
就
wicked
说
people
到，
are filled with hatred
这些
and are
邪
the
恶的
worst of
人
humankind.
充满了仇
Within
恨，
this cycle of birth and death,
是人类
I
当中最
continuously
糟糕的
cast them
一
into the
种。
wombs of demonic
他们不
beings.
停的
Life after
转
life,
世
these
到
fools
恶魔的
exist
子宫当中，
among demonic
生
beings
生
and
世世
never
这些傻
attain me,
瓜
O Arjuna.
在
And so
恶
they
魔所有
attain
之
the
中，
lowest state
永
of
远无法真
existence.
打我。所以他
There are
们
three gateways to
只
this
到
hell.
了到达
Desire,
了
anger, and greed.
较低的状态，
Therefore, one should
有
abandon them
3道
as they
门
bring
通
ruin
于
to
这
the
个地
soul.
狱：
These
欲望、
verses you've heard
贪婪和
before.
邪恶。
There was one person, having met Guruji,
有一个
decided
人
to
遇到
leave.
咕噜基，并决定
And
离开，
wasn't the first, will not be the last.
并不是第一个，也
And
不会
Guruji
是最
said
后一个。
about this person, he said,
咕噜
if
基
he
谈到
only
这个
knew
人时，他
how
说：
long
如果他知道
he has
他
taken him to come to me.
花了
And
多
Guruji
长
was
时间才
talking
来到
about
我
what's
身
written in
边。
the scriptures. It
咕
says
噜基
normally
在
about
谈
100,000
到圣经
human
中写道，
incarnations.
通常
It
人
takes
大约
for
有
one to
10万
attain
个人类的转世
self-realization.
要达到。
Guruji said it
自我
can be
转世，
more than
咕噜
that,
基说
between 100 to 200,000
能
lives.
从100到220
Just imagine
万
if you
世。
lived for each life 30 years,
想象一下，每一世你都活
That would
大概
be
30年，
3 million years.
那就是300万
Imagine
年，
living for
想象一下。
3 million years.
活300万年。
Yeah. You all have lived for that period of time, incarnating again
你
and
们
again
所有
and
人
again.
都
3
不
million
停的
years.
转世。
What would you do
300
with
万
3
年，
million years?
你用这300
Well,
万
you
年
do
做
it
什
over
么
and
呢？
over again.
你一遍又一遍的
And
做
you，do everything that you possibly could.
你做了一切
Everything
你
you could
可能
possibly wish
去
to
做的
do,
事情，
you would do. all the desires that you wish to have, you could fulfill.
所有这些欲望你都可以去实
But
现，
yet here you are again.
但你又来了
3 million years.
，300万年
It's，a long time. A very long
这是
time.
很长的时间。
There was one man who was walking with Guruji. They were
有一
together,
个
they
人
were
咕
walking
噜
in the
基
light
散
hall,
步，
and this
他
man
们
was
在
talking
大
with
厅里
Guruji,
走，
and he was
这个
asking
人与咕
Guruji a
噜基在
question,
聊天，
like what he
他
should
问咕
do,
噜基一个问题，
like which direction he should go in.
问咕噜基他应该走
So
哪个
as they
方
were
向。
walking, Guruji was
当
listening
他
to
们
the
走的
man,
时候，
but he
咕
was
噜基
also
在听那个
aware
人，
of the
他
soul's
同时也意识到这个
choice,
人的灵魂
what
的
direction
选
the soul
择。
wanted to take. So when the guy was asking the
因
questions,
此，当那个人问问题
Guruji
的
was
时候，
answering him according
咕
to
噜
the
基
soul's
是
dictates,
根据这个
the
灵
direction that the
魂
soul wanted to take.
的选择来回
And
答
the man
他。
was going, no, no,
这个人说不，
because he has a mind, he has a personality.
因为他有
And
思
from
想，他
that
有个性
perspective,。from that stance, not the stance of the soul, the divine self,
他是从
but
那
the
个立场
stance
出发，
of the
而不是从灵
personality.
魂的角度
The
出发。
personality was saying, no, Guruji.
他的小我说不，咕
Out
噜
of the
基，
option A and B, I think I'll take B.
在 A 和 B
And
的选
Guruji
择
is
中，
saying,
我
but
想我
I
会
think you
选
should
B。
go for option
咕噜
A,
基说，
which
我
is
想
the
你该
soul's
选择
choice.
A，这是灵魂的
And the
选
guys
择
go,。I think I'll go for
然后灵
option
魂
B.
说，然后这个人说不，我选 B。
So when we're trapped in that egoic state of
所以，
identity,
当我们陷入这种小我
we
的
can't even
状
hear
态
our
当中
own
时，
soul's
我们甚至听不到我们灵魂的声音。
language. The soul has its own way of letting you know if you're sensitive enough to
灵
hear
魂有
it.
它的方式去来告诉你，但是要看你有没有
And if
足
one
够的
doesn't
敏
choose
感
to
去
follow the
感
advice
知。
of the guru or the teachings
如
in
果
the
一个
scriptures,
人选择不去听听咕噜的
their
建议，
own
或者
egoic
是圣经文
identity
当中
will
的建
compel
议，
them to
他
take a certain
们
route in
的
life.
小我会
So do we
驱使
want
他
to
们
align with
选
the
择
will of
某
God or
种人
not?
生道路。
Do we want
所
to
以我们是
experience
否要
another
与神
10,
保持一致
15,
呢？还是我们
100, 500
想
lifetimes
再经历
playing the same
更
game
多的人
again?
生？
God will send his saints to
同样
remind
的游
us
戏。
again and again.
神会不停的派他的圣人来
But it's not
提醒我们，
necessarily going to be the case
但
that in your next life, Guruji comes again.
下一世可能就
Guruji
不
said
是咕
every
噜基来了。
30,000 years on average, I
但咕噜
incarnate.
基说，每30次他就会来一次。
So do we choose to align with the will of God or not?
所以我们要选择与神的意志保
A
持一
couple
致
that
吗
were？in some devotees in Mauritius, and Guruji
毛里
said
求斯有一
to
对夫妇，
them
咕噜
when
基
they
对
were
他
there,
们
he
说
said, "It's been a long time since I've seen you.
哦，
Why did you
我已
leave
经
it so
很久没
long?"
见到你
And
们
they
了，你们为什么离开这么久？
looked at each other. They
然后
like
他们
didn't
互相
know.
看着对
He says,
方
"It's。been 15,000 years
不知道。
since I've seen you."
这是15000年了，我没有
Yeah.
看到过你们。
Guruji's got a very long memory.
咕噜基有很长的记忆。
Remember that statement? In the whole
记住那
history
句
of
话。
humanity, there's
在
only
整个人
been
的历
3
史当
people
中
that have ever evolved faster
只有
than they
3
should
个人
have
的
done.
灵性进展超过了他们
So
本应
he's
该有的
aware
速
of
度，
every single
所以
human
他
being,
知
the
道每
divine
个
plan
人
for
的
every
灵魂
single
进展
human。being. It's hard to surprise him on birthdays. He knows
很难
everything,
在
but
他
he's
生日
good
的
at
时
playing
候
a
给他
surprise.
惊喜，但他很擅长玩惊喜。
Okay, practical steps for alignment.
好
Manmana
的，
bhava
实际的步
matakto
骤。
madhyaji mam namaskuru mame vishyasi satyam te prati jani priyosami. Fix your mind on me, be devoted to me, worship me, bow down
把
before
你
me,
的
and
注意力
you
放在
shall
我
come
身
to
上，
me.
忠诚
I
于我，
promise you this for certain,
奉
for
献
you
于
are
我，
dear to me.
我就
So
会
this is the advice that Krishna gives to Arjuna.
因为
One
你
of
是对
the
我最亲近
penultimate
的，这是
verses in
古
the
纳给阿
Gita.
朱纳的话，
A very, very important verse.
非
So
常
he's
重要的
giving
一章
him clear
一节，
instructions what to
他
do,
给了他
how
很
to
清晰
align
的
to
指
the will of
引，
God.
做什么，如何与神的意志
So
保持
what
一
does this
致。
result in?
所以这会产生什么结果呢？
If we have been trying to put into practice, and I say
如果我
trying,
们一直在练习，
because it's
至
our
少是在
choice.
尝试，因为这是我们的选
One
择
day。we might get a bit lazy and lie in bed.
某
Shall
一
I do
天
my
可
Kriya
能会
practice?
我们懒一
Just
点，
another 10
我
minutes.
该做我们的克利安吗？或者再等10分
But
钟
if？we choose to put into practice
但
the
如果我们
instructions
选
that Krishna has
择
given to
练习
Arjuna in the Gita,
奎
and
师
given
那
to
给阿朱
humanity,
那给的
certain
指引，
qualities will arise.
有些品质会升
Firstly,
起，
the
也会被
cultivation of
唤醒。
devotion.
首
In
先是
chapter
奉爱，
6, verse
在第
14,
6章第14节中
Krishna
说
says，to Arjuna,
奎师那对阿
being
朱那
serene
说
and，fearless, firm in the vow of celibacy,
保持
and
平静
holding the
和无
mind
所
in
畏惧
check,
坚
he
定
should
的
fix his thoughts on me, sitting in meditation.
把你的思想集中在我的
He should hold
我上
me
面
to be the goal of life.
你应该
So it's
把
very
我作为
important
人
to
生目
cultivate
标
that quality
所
of
以
meditation.
培养这种冥
Cultivating
想
atmic
品
Kriya
质是非
practice
常重要
daily.
的每天的
You all
克
do
利亚
your
练
Kriya
习
practice daily?
你
Yeah?
们都做你们的克利亚练习
When
对
you
吗
finish your Kriya practice,
当
take
你
the
完成
opportunity
你的
just to
克利亚的
sit,
时候
meditate on the Guru,
抓住机
on the
会
feet of the Guru, or
静坐
meditate
冥
on your
想
Ishtadev.
咕噜的圣祖或者你的
Focus the mind on
个人
God.
圣把注意力放在神身上
In chapter 9, verse 26, it's Guruji's
第九
favorite
章
verse
第
from the
26节
Gita.
中说咕噜基最喜欢的一
Whoever
章
offers to me with
是古语
devotion a
梵歌
leaf,
的
a
诗句
flower, a fruit, or some water,
无论
accept
谁
this
带着虔诚
offering
的
made
心
with
向我
devotion
供
by
养
one who's pure of
叶子
heart.
一朵花我都接受
So offer
以最
your love to the Lord every
所
day
以
in
把
the form of
你
puja.
的爱奉献给神
It's very
通过
important to
普加
connect
的
with the
形
divine
式
every day. Because when
非
you're
常
serving the
重要与
deities,
神
absolutely,
连接
well, I can say
每
every
天
day, it's not,
我可
you
以
are
说
serving them, but they're serving
你
you
每
much
天都在
more.
服务他们但他们为你服务的更多
There was once a question,
曾经有一
somebody
个
asked
问题
Guruji,
有人问咕噜
how is
基
it that these some people are born like very crippled and they can't even take care of
为什么有
themselves?
些人他们天
Why
生
would a
就很
soul
残
choose to
废
be born into a body like
为
this?
什么有灵魂
where they're
选
so
择以
crippled
这
they
样的
can't
方
do
式出
anything.
生呢
And Guruji
他们
says,
如此
well,
残废什么都做不了
they are,
咕噜基说
let's say, more advanced souls,
他们是更
and they've come
先
to
进的
serve.
灵魂
And this person
他
said,
们
yeah, but
来
how?
是为了服务
They can't do anything.
然后这个人说
He says
对
they've
啊
come to
那
teach you
么
love.
怎么服务呢他们什么都做不了
He
咕噜
says
基
when
说
you're serving
他
these
们来是为
people,
了教你爱
they can't do
当
anything
你
for
服务这
themselves.
些
Do you
人时他
expect
们什么
anything?
都不
And the
你
person
会
said, no.
你会期待回馈吗
He said,
反馈
exactly.
吗他说不对的
They're teaching you how to serve
他
without
们
any
在教你
expectation,
如何不带
They're
期
teaching
待
you how to
的
love
去服务
without
他
expecting
们在教
anything
你
back.
如何不带期待的去爱
And then the person realized, wow.
然后那个人意识到说
So
哇
when you're performing your puja,
所以当你
of
在做
course,
普加的
without
时候
that state of expectation, you
当
just
然你
offer
不会有
that,
期待
that service to them. You
你
render
只
that
是将
service
那
to
种
them.
把那种
But
服
they are
务
giving you so much more.
给神但他们确实给了你更多
In chapter 12, verse 2, Krishna says,
第12
In
章
my
第2节
opinion,
中说
those
可是
who
拿
are
着说
forever absorbed in me, with strong faith and worship my personal form, with focused minds are on the highest path. Some years ago,
那些专注我的人
chapter
走在
12,
最
verse
崇高
2,
的道路上
just taking a pause for the translators. Some years ago, when Guruji went to Poland, he was
几
traveling,
年前当咕噜基去
and he
波
went
兰
out of
时
his way to go and visit one devotee. One devotee, she was sick,
他去见一个奉
and she
献
had
者一个
her
奉献者
family
生病
member
了
taking care of her. She couldn't go
她的家人
anywhere.
照
She
顾
was
着她
pretty much confined to
他
the
哪都
bed.
不能去
And Guruji went to visit her,
他在躺在床上
spent some time
咕噜基
with her.
去拜访了他
and he went
花了一点
because
时
of
间
that quality of devotion.
他去的
Every
原
day
因
she
是
would
因
do
为
her
他的
puja
奉
to
爱
her deity.
每天他
Every
都
day
会
she
对
would
他的神
perform
灵
loving
做
service
普
to the
加
divine. And just purely for that, that's what drew him
仅
to
仅是
her.
因为这咕
When
噜
he
基
was
就牵引了咕噜基
he
去他
was back
身
here,
边
he was saying that was the reason that he went to see her. It was because of
他
that
说这
quality
就
of
是
devotion.
他去看他的原因
And that's something beautiful.
正如我
As I
所
said
说
before,
当
when
我们
we
有那
have
种
that
真
sincerity
诚并愿
and we
意
show that
与神
willingness
建立关系的时
to
候
enter into
神就
relationship
会
with God,
反射这份关
God
系
reflects that willingness.
那份意愿咕噜
And
基
so
说过如果
Guruji said,
你
even
向
if you
神
take
走一
one
步
step
他
towards God,
会向你
he
走
takes
100步
100 steps towards
这
you.
就是为
That's
什么
true from so
通过
many
如此多的
experiences.
体验咕噜基如
Guruji
此
really
确实是
does.
这样做的
Before
在
he
咕噜
even goes
基
to
去
go to
到
a
那个
country
国
to do
家
darshan,
做达山的时候
he's
他已
already on
经
the other
在
levels.
另
A
外一
lot
个
of
层
people
面
are
与
having
那些人
experiences
链
with
接了
Guruji
人
before
们
they
开
even
始梦
meet
到
him.
他
People
他来
start
到人们
dreaming
的
of him
梦
in
里面
dreams. He comes into their dream and he
与
presents
他们互
himself, he
动
says hello, they interact. Before they've even physically met
因
him.
为确实当他
Because when he does
去那个
travel to
国家
that
的时候
country,
他已
he's
经在
preparing
为那个
them
关系
for
做准
that
备了
encounter, for that
这
meeting,
Guruji
for
总在
that
做
beginning
这
of
个
that
事情
relationship. And Guruji's doing this all the time,
可
meeting
能
people on other levels of
在
reality.
咕噜基总是
And
在
then
不
maybe
同的
some
维度与
months,
他
some
们
years,
建立
they
关
get to
系
meet him.
可能几个月之后他们在现实当中相遇 专注于我，
Focus your mind on me, Chapter 9, verse 34.
奉献于我，
Focus your mind on
把
me.
你的
Be
头脑
devoted
专
to
注
me.
于我，
Offer worship to me. Bow down to me. Engaging your mind in this
一定会来
way,
到我身边。
holding me as the supreme goal, you will surely
所以这是
come
非
to
常
me.
确定的。
So it's very
如果你
reassuring.
想与神的意志保持一致的话，
So if you want to align with the will
可
of God,
以去遵行博迦梵
you
歌
can
中
follow
的
the
指引。
instructions which are found within the Gita,
奎师那像阿
to
周那
perform the actions
这样
that
的行
Krishna
指引，
explains to
我
Arjuna,
们
and
会去到他
we
身
will
边。
come
他
to
向我
him.
们保证了这一点，
He
他说你会
assures
来到我
us
身
of
边。
this. He says, you will come
歌
to
勒基
me.
说关于加帕，
Guruji said
他说 加
about
帕
japa,
在提醒
he
我
was
们
talking about
把注意
japa,
力放在
reminding
神身上，
ourselves to
唱诵神的圣名。
focus the mind on God,
他在那
chant the
大
name
圣
of
经
God.
中说
And he said in the
如果
Narada
你想
Bhakti
获得
Sutras,
自由，
if you want to
一
attain
种不
freedom,
受干扰的自
if you
由，
want to have
只有
that
当
freedom from
这件事持续
distraction,
不断的
it's
积累
only
的时候，才有
when
可能发
something
生。
becomes continuous.
为了让心灵得到那种平静、喜悦，它必须持续不
For the
断，这
mind
就
to attain
是
to
加
that
帕。
peace, to that joy, it
当你
has
在
to be
做加帕的时
continuous.
候，你
This
进
is
入
what
一
is
种深度
japam.
的冥想，
When you were
这不
doing
是你
japam, you
静
were
静的坐
entering
在那
into
里，
deep
不，
meditation. It's not that you were sitting there
你的头
quietly
脑
with
进
your
入
eyes.
某种状态，
No,
你
your
会听
mind
到
enters
神的
into a
圣
certain
名，
state of
那种平
meditation.
静的冥想
When you
状
were
态
hearing the glory of the
让你
Lord,
的内
that
心变
creative
得活
mind
跃，
becomes active
你
inside of you.
的头脑变成了一个磁
Then
碟，
that mind
就像在波
itself
兰的那
becomes
位
like a
女士，
magnet. It's like
她把
that lady
因为
in
她的奉
Poland.
献、奉爱
She
精
was
神吸
magnetizing
引了咕噜
Guruji
基
to
去
her
到她
because
身
of
边，
that quality of
咕噜
devotion.
基
Guruji went out of his way
那
to
种
travel to
心
her,
灵
to
就
be
变
with
成了一
her.
个磁铁，
That mind itself becomes like a magnet.
那种磁
Then one
铁把
attains.
神
That magnet
吸
pulls
引
the
到啥
Supreme
身
Lord
边。
himself. That vibration which you have
每一
created,
个你的每一
that
个细胞
vibration is not
都
just like
开
that.
始
Every pore,
正
every
听着
cell
神的
of your
神
body
的圣
starts
名
to，vibrate that divine name.
所以这是非常重要的。我们实际上没有意识到，
So
当我
this
们
is
唱诵神的
very,
圣
very
名的时候，
important. We're
我
not
们只是
aware
在头
actually.
脑
When we
里
chant
听
the
到，
divine name,
或者我们大声唱诵
we，just
我们
hear
并
it
没
in
有
our
意识
minds.
到我们的内
Or
在
maybe
发
we're
生着
chanting
什
out
么。
loud.
这
We
个
don't
圣
perceive
名
what
在
happens
我
inside
们
of
的
us.
每一
That,
个部分都在
that
震
name
动，
begins to vibrate
而
in
神
every
是充
part
分
of
意
our
识到这一
being.
点的，
And the divine is fully aware of that.
这就会吸引他。
Becomes gravitated,
我们可能
magnetized
意识
to
不到，
us.
但当我们唱诵神的圣名的时候，
We might not perceive that. But when we start chanting the name of God,
我
we
们确实
surely
变得更
become
专注，
very, very, how do you
他
say,
也
attentive
更关注到
from
我们。
God's perspective. He becomes very aware of us, showing that intention.
所以实际的步骤就是做铺
So
架。
practical
我
steps
说的一
doing
件
japa,
是培
doing
养
puja.
vandana，比如
One
说
thing I said is
谦卑。
cultivating the
当你做
quality
你
of
铺架的
vandana,
之前，你
like
鞠躬，
humility.
然后你做铺架，然后
So
你
before you
再
do
鞠
your
躬。
puja, you bow down,
我称那
and then
为
you perform your puja,
vandana
and
三明
afterwards
治
you，bow down
因为
again.
你有
I call that the
vandana
Vandana Archana sandwich.
阿
Because
正
you
呐，
have
还有
Vandana,
阿 vandana。
you have
所以当
Archana,
我们来
and
到
then you
寺
have
庙的时候
Vandana.，
你鞠
So when we
躬，
come in here into the temple,
你
you
在
come
培
in,
养
you
谦
bow
卑的
down.
品质。当你离开的
Cultivate
时
that
候，你
quality of
再
humility.
鞠
When we
躬，
leave,
你
before
再
we
培
leave,
养那份
you
谦
bow
卑的
down.
品质
You，cultivate that quality of humility.
这非常重要。
It's very important to
如果你
cultivate that quality of humility.
提醒你自己，咕噜基
If
在
you
每一个人
remind
的心
yourself
中。
that
可是
Guruji is
那说
present
他住
within
在
each
所有众
person,
生的心中，所以
Krishna
至高
says
无
that
上
he
的
lives
神
in
住
the
在
heart of
每
all
个人心
beings.
中。
So the
但
Supreme
有时
Being
候
lives
我
in
们并不
everybody's
这样
heart,
子行为，我们有
but
些时候
sometimes we
有
don't
点敏锐
act、like
尖
that.
锐。
Sometimes
我
we're a
也
bit
是，我也好
sharp,
不了多少。
isn't it? Me
但
also.
如果我有
I'm
能
no
力
better.
提醒自己，咕噜
But
基
if
住
I
在
have that
他所
capacity
有
to
的
remind
奉献者
myself
当中，
that Guruji
那
lives
么
in the
可
heart
能我
of
会
all of his
对
devotees,
别
everybody,
人的方式会更谦
then
卑，
perhaps the way I would treat people, the humility
也
that I
会
would
帮
have
助
towards
他
them,
们与神的关系更
would
亲密。
enable them to have
所以培
a
养这
closer
份谦卑
relationship，with God also. So cultivate that
与
quality of
神
humility,
建立一个
practicing
有意义、
Vandana
非常
Bhakti.
重要的一个实际的步骤，
Developing a friendship with God,
与你的
very important.
神
Another
像
practical step.
待在一起。
Spend time with
你
your
每天都与
deities.
你的神像待在一起吗？
Do you spend time with your deities every day?
肯定有人这样做，对吗？
Oh. Somebody
我
must
认
do
识的
that.
一些人，一些奉献者，在
Some
他
people,
们
I
让
know,
神灵、
some
神
devotees
像睡
like
觉 觉之前，他们会给他们读一些佛家百谈。当你还是孩子的时候，或者你的父母会给你读一个睡前小故事。你想，你不会去睡觉，直到你听到你的故事。所以你的父母或任何人必须要给你读这个故事。
mom or dad or whoever it was had to read you that story and then you go off to sleep.
实际上在睡前
devotees actually
会给他们
read
的神
stories
像
from
读
the
国家
Srimad
法坛
Bhagavatam to the
这非
deities
常的
before they
甜
put
蜜
them to sleep. It's a very nice way of spending
这是
time.
神想要的
And that's what God
你不能
wants.
拥有一份与神
You
的关
can't
系
really
除
have a
非你去发
relationship
展
with the
这份
divine
友谊
unless you develop that friendship, that quality of friendship.
所以去花时间
It's very, very important. So
想
put that
想
time aside.
如果你与神的关系是朋友的关
Think
系
to
那这
yourself,
种
what
关
would
系
that
会是什么
relationship
样
look
子
like if you were friends with God?
无私的服务是一个非常重要的与神
Selfless
的一致
service
保持
is a
一
very
致的
important
步骤
practical step for
因为
aligning
无私
with
的
the will
服
of
务会
God.
让你
Because selfless service takes you away from
远离自我
selfishness
为中
to
心的状态
selflessness. Takes you from the
转
state of
变为
egocentric
从
to
灵魂的角度去
being aware of life
觉知
from
生
the
命
perspective of the
所
soul.
以无私的服
So
务
selfless service is a very
是非常
important
重要的帮
way
助
of
你转
bringing
变
you
这种状态
and
所以无
changing
私的
that
服务
state of
可以
identity.
是业力瑜伽但注入了
So
奉爱
selfless service
在
can
第
be
3章
karma
第
yoga,
30节
but
中
infused with bhakti.
奎师那对阿朱那说
In chapter
将你
3,
所
verse
有的
30,
行为奉献给我
Krishna says to
把你
Arjuna,
的头
dedicating
脑
all your actions to me,
专注在我身上
with a mind
远离
centered
欲
in the
望和
self,
自私
free from
保持
desire
情
and
绪
selfishness.
的平衡
With your emotions held in
所以
balance,
每天我们
you
都
should
有
engage
机
in
会去做
battle.
服务
So
你
every
无
day
法
we've
逃
got this
避
opportunity to perform
你必须
service.
要为你的父母
You can't run away from
孩
it.
子
You
等
have
等
to do service for
做服
your
务
mother or
你的
father,
老板
uncle, wife, children,
很
for
多
your
人
boss,
你
for your
的
auntie,
咕噜
for so many people.
所以你必须
for your
要
guru.
去做服务但你
So
如
you
何
have
做
to
服务
perform service, always. But how do you perform that?
把你的行为的奉献给
He
我
says, dedicating all your
所以
actions
非
to
常
me.
重要的是简单的
So
是
there is very easy
在
practical
你
ways
开
to
始
do
工作
this.
之前不管什么工作
Before you start
或
your
者
work,
在你工作的时候
whatever it is,
你可以给自己调一
or
个计
maybe
时器
during when you're working, you can set yourself
中
a
途休
timer.
息
You set your alarm to go off, maybe
一
partway through
旦
your
闹
working
钟响
day.
起就提醒自己
And
啊
then
我现在
once that alarm's gone off, it's a
要
reminder,
通
okay,
过
I have
想
to
神
perform
来做
service,
服务
thinking of the Lord, thinking
可
of the
能
Guru.
10分钟或15分钟
So perhaps within a certain time period, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you try to
你尝试着去
offer
想神
and
或者
think
上师
of
把一切都
the
献给
Lord,
他
of the Guru, and you offer everything to Him
可能每
during that
天
time.
8小时都
Maybe
这
to
样
do
做
it
不
for
可
the whole
能
working day,
但
8
从
hours is
小
not
事做
possible.
起
But you start
当
small.
它是小的时候
When you start
可以
small,
实现
it's
当你
achievable.
可以实现的时候你
And
就
when it's
建立了信
achievable,
心
okay,
当你
I've
有
done
信
this.
心的时候
You
你就
build your
可以做更大
confidence.
的
When
一
you
步
build your
然
confidence,
后就可
I
能是
can take a
20 分
bigger
钟
step.
30分钟所以非常
So
实
maybe
用
it's
的步
20
骤
minutes, then it's 30 minutes. So a very practical step
在
that you
你
can
工作
take.
的时候
Set yourself a little timer
给自己
during
调个
your
闹
work.
钟
And once that
闹
goes
钟
off,
一旦
then
响起
you've got
给
20
自己10
minutes,
到
10
15分
minutes,
钟的时
15
间去
minutes
想神
to offer
看
all of
看
your
你的状
actions
况怎么
towards
样
the divine. And see how you do.
遵行咕噜的指示
Following the Guru's
非常重要
adesh,
的一步
so the instructions from the Guru, very important factor, a practical step for alignment. There will be each person,
每个人都有特定的达摩和业力
everybody has a specific
咕噜
dharma,
都
a
会
karma
对此
that they
做出
incarnate
回
with.
应所以我们很
And
多
the Guru
奉
responds
献
to
者
that.
但你们
So we're
并不
many
做着同样
devotees
的
here,
工作
but you
在
don't
同一个
all
国家
live in the same
你们
countries,
没有
you
同
don't do
样
the
的
same job,
家庭没有同样的达摩
you don't have the same kind of families, you don't have the same dharma.
但咕噜
But
吉可
Guruji can
以
instruct
独
each one
独特的指引着每
specifically
一个
for
人
what you need to do in
所
your
以
life.
如果你有那个机会去问咕
So
噜吉我应该做
if you
什
have
么
that capacity and you
选
ask,
A 或 B
Guruji,
或
what
C
should
或
I
D
do? Option A or B, or C or D.
很多人想让
Many
我
times
帮
when
他们
people
问咕
come
噜吉
to
问题我总
me
是给
to
他
ask
们
Guruji
一些建议
questions to Guruji, I always give
因
them
为当
some
你接
advice
近
on
咕
how
噜
to
的
ask
时
the
候
question. Because it's
你
very
需要以
important
一
when you
种非
approach the
常清
Guru
晰的方式非
that you
常开
approach
放
the
的方
Guru
式
in a very clear way, a very open way. I know people that have approached Guruji and asked him a question, and he just said yes.
当你问
Now,
咕噜吉非
the
常
question
封
was
闭
very
的
closed.
答问题
Guruji,
的时
should I
候
do this?
而不是以一种咕
They
噜
didn't
吉我
actually,
应
when
该
they
做这
approached
或者做
Guruji, they
那
didn't actually approach
或
him
者
with,
你推
Guruji, should
荐
I
我
do
另一个
this,
选择
or this, or this, or do you
你觉得我
recommend
应该
another
做什么
option for me.
有些时候他们以一种非常封闭的方式去接近大师，所以他们就会得到非常封闭的答案，所以只会听到 yes。是，然后2年之后，他们说：“咕噜鸡，我真的应该做这个吗？”然后咕噜鸡说：“不，当然不是。”
Should I really be doing this? He says, No, of course not.
为什么这么说呢？你让我说 yes 呢？
You told me to do this.
为什么你没
Yes, I
告
know
诉
I
我？
did.
他说因为你不想听
But
到
why
其
did
他
you
的
tell me? Because you didn't want to hear anything else.
所以听从咕噜的指示非常重要。
So
他
following the
给
Guru
了人们
Adesh
一
is
般的指
important.
示，比如
And of
说
course, he
你
gives
的
general instructions for
做克
everybody.
俩
Do
瑜
your
伽
Kriya, do your
读波特
Japa,
梵歌，
read a
每
verse
天都
of
读
the
波特梵
Bhagavad
歌
Gita
等
every
等。
day. But
但
if
如
you
果
do
你有
ask
具体的
him
问题的话，
something
你应该以一
specific,
个更开放的
you
方式
should
去
approach
靠
him
近
in the
他，
right manner,
问他
openly.
1、2、3的
Option
选
1,
项，
2,
或者
3.
咕噜鸡，你会怎么建议？
What's your option, Guruji? What would be your answer? When you approach him in the right way,
当你
he
以
can
正
give
确
you
的
very
方
clear
式去
instructions
靠近他的时
that
候，
will
他
really
就会
benefit
真的
you.
可以给你答案，并真正的帮助到你。
Okay. One of
有
the
一个非常
practical
实
steps
际
for
的、
alignment,
最重要
one of the
的
most
实际的
important ones, is to
方
have
式
good
是
association.
有一
There are
个
so many
好
practical
的
tips that I could
环
give
境
here,，
就是
but you have
你
already
已经
received a
从咕
lot
噜鸡那个地方获
from
得了
Guruji
很多了，
himself.
但也确实是有一个
But one of the most
是
important
你
ones
的
is
你
association.
的周围的人，
And it's very important to be
非常重要的是
associated
与
with the
你
devotees of the
与
Lord.
奉献者与神的奉献者们
Because
常在一起，因为当你在
if
开
you
始
start
灵
the
性之路
spiritual
的时
path,
候，你可
when
能
you
会有
start,
很
you
多
might
热
have
情
lots of enthusiasm. Yes,
啊！我
I found
找
my
到我的咕
Sadhguru.
噜真的
It's
很
really
棒，
great.
我
I
在
know
这
I
里，
am
我很
here.
高兴，
I'm
我爱每
happy
个
and
人
I'm，in
让
love
我
with
们
everybody.
一起走吧。
Let's go.
这样你就开始你
So you
的
go off on your
灵性
spiritual
道
path.
路。
And the
然后
first 3
几
months,
个月、一
a
年，
year, you're all
然后2、
excited.
3年，
And then after 2 or
你
3
仍
years,
然
you're
兴奋，
still
当然会
excited,
少一
but
点
it's a
兴
little bit
奋。然后
less.
6、7年
And
之
then
后，
after like
兴奋
6
度
or
可能
7
会更
years,
降
maybe
低。
the excitement's lower.
然后10年、15
Then after
年，
10
兴
or
奋
15 years,
你会
the
更少
excitement
兴
goes
奋。
down a little bit more. And it's very easy to forget about
很容易忘
the
记
grace that's
我们
given.
被给予的恩
It's very
典，
easy to
也
forget
很容
about
易
the
被忘记
opportunities
我
that have
们
been
被给予
given.
的机会。
When you're
当我们
around
与在
a
丧家的
sangha,
时候，与
when
奉
you're
献者
around
们在一起的
devotees,
时候，
people
那
who've
些
chosen
选
to
择与
align to
神
the
的
will of
意志
God,
保持一致的人，
it becomes much
这样会
easier
让
to
你
continue on
更
that path of
容易走
consciously
这条
wanting to
路。
align with the will of God.
丧家是非常重要
Sangha
的，
is super, super important.
很多人
And a lot of people
离
who
开
choose
选
to
择离开这
leave
条
the
路，
path,
是
a
因为
lot
他
of
们
them
没有
don't
与上
have
家的
that connection with
商
the
家
Sangha.
的联
It
系，
happens a lot.
这常
So
发
being
生。
around
所
devotees,
以，
people who've chosen to align with the will
当
of
你
God,
与奉献者
when you
们在
come
一起
together as a，
你
group,
们在一起的时候，这会增强
it
你的
helps
力
to
量，
empower you, to
提
remind
醒
you
你做
of
出的
the
选
choice
择。
that you have made.
另一个非
Another very
常实
practical
用的
tip for
建议
alignment.
是阅
Reading
读
scriptures.
圣经，阅读经典。
Spiritual scriptures give us the
阅读让
understanding
我
of the
们更
journey of
了解
life
生命的旅
and the
程
purpose
和
of
目
life.
的，
They
他
give you
们
the
给了你一
context
个背景，以
and
及
also the instructions of how to
帮
reach
助我
that
们
goal,
去如何
that
达到这个
conclusion
目
of
标。
life.
可是那在第4章第9节
Krishna
中
said,
所说的，
chapter 4, verse 9,
任
Whosoever
何知
knows the truth
道
of my birth
我出生的
and
和
deeds,
行为的真相
O
的人，
Arjuna, is not reborn again.
他
After leaving the
们不
body,
会
they
再
come
重
to me.
生，他们离开身体之后就会来到我这里。
So
所
Guruji
以
said in one
咕
of
噜鸡
his
在一次巴格
Bhakti
提
Sutra
经
talks,
讲讲中
if
说，
you
如果
meditate
你
on
冥想
only
其
one
中一个
lila,
里拉，
if you look up here,
你看这
you
里，
can see the
你
whole
能
life
看
of
到
Krishna.
奎师那的整个
It's
生
very
命，
beautiful
这是
because
他
this
的
is
一
his
天，
day,
他显现的那一天。
the day that he manifested.
你可以选择任
And
何
you
一个
can
里
pick
拉，
any one of these leelas. It's very beautiful.
只是冥想它。
And just meditate
咕
on
噜
it.
鸡说，如果你只
Guruji
是
said
冥
if
想
you
其
just
中一个里
meditate
拉，
on one of
你
these
就能
leelas,
了
you
悟
can
上帝
attain God
了悟
realization.
神。如果你真正的
You
冥想
really go into
去
it.
冥
You
想的
really
话，
meditate on it. You really, how do you say?
我
When you say
们总
we sing
在
bhajan all the time here in
巴
the
赞
temple,
总
bhaj
在寺
means
庙
to
里
attach the
唱
mind.
拜赞，
You attach the
你总
mind
是把
to
你的
that
头脑
lila.
放在
You're
里拉
always
上，
meditating on it.
你就能获得神。
You can attain God Himself.
这非常美妙，但
It's very
也很简
beautiful,
单，
but
这
very,
并
very
这并
simple.
不难。
It's not hard. You can take one of the Bhagavad Gita cards. Anybody have the set? The Gita cards? And it's nice that you can just like draw them randomly. Every day you can take a card. You read the verse. You meditate on it. You can stick it in your purse, or they don't quite fit in the phone, or in your pocket.
当你吃饭的时
When
候
you're sitting down at lunch, you can
你
take
可以
it
再把它
out,
拿出来再
read
冥
it
想一
again,
下。
meditate a little bit on it.
睡
At
觉
the
之
end of the
前
day, before you go to
也可以
bed,
把它放在床头
put
柜
it on
上
the
再读
bedside
一下。
table, read the verse again.
只
Just
是冥
meditating
想
on the verses of the
国家
Gita
梵
are
高的卡
extremely
片
beneficial
也非常
spiritually.
重要，
Helps to
是
purify
帮
you,
助
to
你
cleanse
净
you.
化你。最后一个是
Lastly,
建议
one of the
是
most practical steps for alignment
拥
with
有
the will
信
of
仰。
God is to have faith. And I say
我
one
说
of
的
the
最后
last, I
一
mean
个
just
仅
from the
仅是
ones I'm
从今
sharing
天
today.
的演讲
There
来
are so
讲，
many,
其实是有很多。
but it's a very, very important one.
可是那在博家梵歌
Krishna says in the
第
Gita,
第
chapter
28节
17,
中
verse
说，
28,
对
But
Arjuna 在
Arjuna,
那
what is
些
offered
没有
without
信
faith,
仰的那些奉献
be it
下，不
sacrifice,
管是牺牲
austerity,
或
or
慈善，
charity,
都叫做
is called
asat。
asat. It's
这在
worthless
这
in
个
this
世
world
界
and the next.
不重，
Chapter
都没有任
17,
何
verse
价值。
28.
这很重
It's
要，
extremely important
拥有
to have faith in what you're
信
doing.
仰非常重要的。
Really, really, really important.
有些时候可能有点难，
Might be hard sometimes.
你可能不知
You
道
might
为
not
什
be
么
able
你
to
要这
see
样
why
做
you're，doing it.
不明白
What
它
is
的
the
意义。
purpose?
有些时候你必须要相信，
Sometimes you really have to trust.
有些时候这就是
And sometimes
咕噜
this
所
is
做
what the
的，
Guru does.
他给你
He
一种
gives you a
特定的
certain
体验，你
experience
并
that you
不
don't
太
really
理解。
understand. How
你
would you
如何
develop that quality of
去
faith
发
and
展这
trust
份信
if you
仰？
were always in
或者
like
怎么在一
a
个封闭的
confined,
安全环
safe
境，这很容
environment?
易。
It's easy.
当你在你自
When
己
you're
的
in your
环境
own
当中，你
environment,
很
you're
安
nice and
全，
safe.
很安全。
It's safe.
但你如果必
But
须
when
要
you have
超
to
越
go a bit beyond
是
that, when he
超越你的
pushes you
极限
beyond
的
your
时候，
limits,
这就
this
是
is
信
when
仰
that
开始
quality
真
of
的的时
faith
候。
begins to grow.
我只是好
I'm just
奇，
curious, anybody here,
这里
perhaps
有
during a
人
darshan or just
在
before
达
a
山之
darshan,
前，
Guruji
咕噜
said,
吉让你
okay, I want you to talk
演
in
讲
darshan
吗？
today.
这有发生
Did that
过
happen
吗？
to anybody?
有吗？
Yes?
问题是
The question was,
这里
did this happen to anybody
有
here?
人
That just
在
before
达
a
山或在达
darshan or
山中
during a
咕噜吉
darshan,
让你
Guruji
去
asked
演
you,
讲。
I want you to talk in darshan.
当这个发生的时
So
候，会
when
发
that
生什么呢？
happened, what happened?
你变得紧张，
You get
我要讲
nervous.
什么？
What am I going to talk about?
然后你就开
And
始
then
向咕噜
sometimes you
吉
start
祈
praying
祷。
to Guruji, Guruji,
Genau.
please help me, isn't it? So when
当
Guruji
咕噜吉把
takes
你
you out
从
of
这
that
种
safety
安
zone,
全
he pushes
区
you a little
拿
bit
出
more
来
into
的
deep
时候，你
waters
就
of
开
life.
始
You
祈
start to
祷，
pray, you
你感
start
到
to
不舒
connect.
服，你不
You're
太确定。
uncomfortable. You're not sure.
咕噜吉，请
Please
听
be
我
there. Guruji, please guide me.
一定
Please
在这
help
个地
me.
方。这就是为什么他
This
就
is
喜
why he
欢
likes to take
带
you
你
beyond
离
the
开你
comfort
的舒
zone.
适区，这
Because
是帮助
you're
了你和他
connecting with
连
him
接。
more. When you're in the safe, the shallows of life, when you're in that safety zone, there's
当
not
你在
so
安全
much,
区
so
的
much
时候，
need
你
to
不
call
太
on
需要
him
他，
because you've got it
因
under
为你感觉
control,
你已经控
seemingly.
制了一切。对，所以他必
So
须
he
要把
has
你
to
推
push
出
you
去
out a
一
little
点，
bit,
然后你就开始与他
and then
连
you
接
start
了。
connecting with him. Help me, please.
请帮助
I
我，
need to
我
talk
需
in
要在
darshan.
大山当中讲话。
Have you ever?
你们都知道
You
吉
all
车
know
对
Jay
吗？
Treyer, right?
他
He does the crowd control.
进行人群控制。
And
有一
one
天他
day
对咕噜吉
Guruji
说：“
asked him,
吉车呀，
he said to
我想
Jay
让
Treyer,
你
tomorrow I want you
在
to
大
speak
山
in
中演
darshan.
讲。”
And
他
he goes,
说
what?：“
我
Me?
吗？过去
But Guruji,
我不
I
能
can't
讲
talk.
话
I'm not
演
a
讲，
mufsa, you know, like a
我
talker,
像
a
一
preacher.
个传教士一
So
样。
on the day of the darshan, the
但
next
是第
day,
二天，
Jay Treyer
这
picks
车
up
呀
the
拿着
microphone.
麦克风，
And it
就
was
像这样
he
拿
was
着麦克
holding the
风。
microphone like this.
哎，这个大家
Yeah,
好，
Jay Gurudev.
我的名字叫杰车呀。
My name is Jay
他是
Treyer.
非常的害
He
怕，
was really,
他
really
是一个
frightened.
很
He's a
大
big,
的
strong guy.
男孩。但这就
But
是咕
sometimes
噜
this is
吉
what
所
Guruji
做的，
does. He pushes us
他
a
把我
little
们
bit
推
beyond our
向我们的
boundaries
极限。
so that we can learn to
这样
have
我们
that
就能
faith.
培
We
养我
can
们的信
cultivate
念。
that quality of trust and faith. So that's
所以
something
这
very
件事
good
非常
to
好的，培
cultivate
养
that
这份
quality of
信
faith
念。
and that
因为
trust.
有些时候，当我
Because
们
sometimes when we are
在深水区的
out
时候，
in deep water, that's when
就是我们非常
we really
真的
need to
非常
connect.
需要
And
连
we
接的
really
时
need
候，
to
需要
trust
相
that
信的时候，
there is a
我们
guiding
需要相
factor.
信
There is
有
somebody
人
taking
在
care
保
of
护着
us.
我们，指引着我们，在这种
That
生
depth
命
of
的
life,
深度，
or that deep water, I would consider to be that point of death. And it happens for all of us, sooner or later. Actually, there was I wasn't sure whether to share this story or not, but there was a guy that I got to know recently. He is a brother of a devotee, of a brahmacharini. I got to meet him, and I was wanting him to meet Guruji. He'd never met Guruji. He had heard of him, and every day we started building this relationship, and he would write to me every day, Hari Om, Jai Gurudev, Swami Anashuya. He'd send a little picture of a deity, and then he would say, have a lovely day, have a blessed day. And every day he would write to me. And he was going to come here for his first darshan about 2 weeks ago, something like that, just before Guruji went to the States. He was waiting for his Murtis to arrive from South India, so that once he had them, he could bring them to the ashram and get them blessed by Guruji. And I was wanting him to come a little bit earlier, but he was like, no, I'm waiting for my deities. I was like, okay. So eventually, his deities arrive. He's super excited. He's been watching the videos of Guruji every day, day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out. And his wife was thinking, what's going on? He doesn't talk to me much nowadays. He's just always watching YouTube. He's watching the videos of Guruji all the time. So the day comes, and I'm all excited. I haven't met him physically. We just talked on the phone. He writes to me every day. But today's the day he's going to come for darshan. And he's meant to arrive, and he doesn't arrive. So I go outside and I see Anup there. Anup was meant to bring him from the train station, and Anup says, yeah, he's had a heart attack. Like, wow. And so he gets taken to hospital. He's in hospital for a few days. And his sister has a dream that he dies the next day or the day after he leaves his body. But on the day that he dies, he has a smile. And I know from experience from other devotees where they have left their body, when that happens, I spoke to Guruji about that. He said yes, they saw something. Often it was either the Lord himself that came to take them, or it was, sometimes it was Mamatar Babaji, sometimes it was a cosmic form of the divine that came, and a host of saints to come and collect that person. He never had a darshan with Guruji physically. He never met him physically. But yet the day that he left his body, he had a smile on his face. For me, stories like this, they deepen that faith, that quality of trust, that there is a plan behind everything. So continue to have that faith in whatever you do, all of your sadhana, all of your efforts on your spiritual path. It will bring you at that point of death, which is the most important point of our life. It will aid you in attaining the Lord himself. Okay, due to time, I'm just going to get to the end. So conclusion. Our duty is to understand the will of God. What is it? Well, he wants to have relationship with us. So if we understand what that relationship is, that we should exclusively focus our minds on him. We should put our effort into that. We should make the choices of how I can focus the mind. When I focus the mind, what actions come out of that? What actions can I perform that are aligned to the will of God? And it's to fulfill your soul's calling. Your soul has been waiting for this for a long time, remember? 3 million years it takes you to come to the divine, to having a relationship with the divine directly. 3 million years. That's not a short time. Now you can either choose, shall I have a relationship with God or with his material creation? Either or. One or the other. Second, with our limited free will, we have to make the best use of the opportunities that life presents by cultivating the right mindset. So, making the choices that reinforce that path of bhakti, the choices that make us dive into our spiritual path. Remember, at the beginning, the first year, you may have been extremely with lots of enthusiasm, very excited. But after the years pass by, yeah, at my career again. Oh yeah, another puja. Can happen, isn't it? I remember I was praying to Ma, please, it's not enough to have a relationship with metal. Give me something more. It's not enough to have just a metal statue. I need more in that relationship. Give me some visions. Give me some experiences, please. I'm dying here. Well, she had to test that sincerity. Am I willing to have a relationship without having those experiences? 3. We should understand the results of aligning or not aligning with the will of God. So the outcome of not taking the opportunity, when God presents himself into your life, Guruji said, on a few occasions, whatever you do, whatever actions you perform in front of me can have cosmic consequences. So if one chooses to stay and one chooses to leave, it can have radical impact on one's life. Remember, I shared briefly about the story of the devotee in Mauritius. The Guruji said, I haven't seen you for 15,000 years. Sometimes if we choose to step away and choose not to align, not to have that relationship, then we may go into a relationship with the material creation. But how long will that last for? We don't know. We really don't know. So it's well worth bearing in mind the consequences. And if you want to align with the will of God, well, absolutely we need a guide. We need a proper guide. If you want to align with the will of God, then one of the best things you can have is a God-realized master. He knows the will of God. He can tell you specifically, this is the will of God for you. This is not the will of God for this person. You have different paths, you have different karma, you have different dharma. This is what I want for you. This is what God wants for you. It's very important. To align with the will of God takes continuous effort. As Guruji said, this is the will. You have to continue to want this. It doesn't happen just like this. You have to work on yourself. Day after day, year after year, maybe life after life. Continuous effort. Does that sound easy? No. Sometimes that's why that initial enthusiasm, yeah, let's go for it, everything's great, can reduce. Because you know, oh my God, this is where the work comes in. This takes effort. But one accepts that it takes effort, it takes dedication. When you accept that, then you can become your best friend on your spiritual path. Remembering that Sangha is the environment that supports you in that. And the ultimate outcome is not in your hands, it's in God's hands. If we've done our 100%, which is actually only 25% of the journey, Guru and God will take care of the rest. When you say, I want to align with you, I will do everything in my power to align with your will, my Lord, and you can continuously show that, He will do everything, He will do all the rest. You don't have to worry. Everything He will take care. So I hope that you enjoyed the lecture. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to try answering if anybody does have. Yes. Well, it seemingly indicates that, of course, there is a will of God, and God has an ability to plan things meticulously. He's planned things for every single human being, for the whole history of humanity so far. God is also aware of all the different directions that life could potentially go, because humanity sees what it sees. It doesn't see any other possibilities, because it's not aware of all the influences, all the factors which can lead to different possibilities, different outcomes. Humanity, with their mind, with their knowledge, with their ability of perception, have a certain ability to perceive. And Guruji says this is less than 1%. So we perceive less than 1% of actually what's taking place, which is virtually nothing. It's very, very small. But God is fully aware of all of that, and it is, let's say, planning and controlling and managing all of that. So I would say from that what Guruji has said, I would say that God is in control of all of that and is giving where possibilities can be given. He's given possibilities. He's given a reign of free will. And how much free will he gives may be according to where that person is on the spiritual path. You hear some stories of saints. Maybe they may have the ability to be in two places at the same time. The more aligned that you become with the will of God, the more capacity, the more responsibility He gives for you to serve. So some great saints have the ability to serve in many places at the same time. Ultimately, that's also part of God's will and God's choosing. I don't see us having the ability to do something outside of God's will, because that would not be within God's power. So it's interesting, this statement, they've evolved faster than what God had planned for them. I think that is also actually within God's plan itself. Any other questions? Okay. Oh, yeah. So the question, is it possible to leave Guruji? Is it possible to leave God? It's not possible, actually, because we live in this material creation. It's part of Him. You can't really leave God, because we live within God. God's created everything. God is everywhere. God is in all things. How can you really leave God? You only leave God really by living through your egocentric perception of life. When you live through your mind, and your sense of I, me, and mine, my identity, that's the only way that you can live in such a way that you don't have a relationship with God directly. You can live in that state of, I want to have a relationship with the material creation, but you don't perceive the divinity in any of that. So you can't truly leave God, because even though you're in the material world, you could be a criminal, you could be the worst of humans, you're still in the presence of God, always. So you can't truly ever leave. But you may choose not to perceive. Thank you very much. And wish you a lovely Krishna Janmashtami tonight. The ceremony will go on through, of course, we had the coming of Krishna, the manifestation at midnight. And then after that, open the curtains, do the abhishekam, the puja, and probably finish around about 2 o'clock. So look forward to seeing you there. Om Shanti 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 Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Prem se bolo Satgurudev Shri Swami Vishwananda Mahaprabhu ki Jai.